Check mic. Woo. All right, hand met.
I've been to enough WordCamps, both as an attendee and a speaker, to know
Check
that you
mic.
cannot rely on it.
Check mic. turn it on. You hear something? Well, I'm loud.
Ah, it's right here. This good? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, you hear it.
I'm used to the little like.
It's right after you.
Okay.
So.
Still good? Okay, yeah. No. No, I'm just waiting for people to have a chance to get here. Yeah, that's what I figured. No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah.
The daisy chain things together, it's like...
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah.
The daisy chain things together, it's like...
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah.
The daisy chain things together, it's like...
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But... Yeah.
The daisy chain things together, it's like...
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But...
Feels good?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Daisy chain things together, it's like... Sorry, the video.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But...
Feels good?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Daisy chain things together, it's like... Sorry, the video.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, actually, since I have a second.
No. No, I'm just waiting for people to... David had no chance to get here. But...
Feels good?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? It sounds like opening remarks are a little behind, so... Which is normal, so... That needs to be... Okay. everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Okay. Go ahead and switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Okay. Go ahead and switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Okay. Go ahead and switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Okay. Switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Okay. Switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? Switch into. Has everybody already got the Wi-Fi information? We're good? What are you going to message me later? That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all? What are you going to message me later? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all?
Hello world, my name is Katie Frederick.
What are you going to message me later? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all?
Hello world, my name is Katie Frederick.
What are you going to message me? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all? What are you going to message me? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all? What are you going to message me? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all? All right. I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. But don't we all? I think I am going to go ahead and get started. That's true. I guess I just want to know the future. About 44 minutes, yeah. Yeah. About 44 minutes, yeah. Yeah. About 44 minutes. About 44 minutes. Thank you. All right. This one's going to be fun because I haven't done this. I haven't given this one yet. All right. So before we start, I'm going to talk a little bit about my approach. As you can see, all right. White, male. This one's going to be fun. Straight. I haven't done this. I haven't given this one yet. So I've pretty much hit the generic start. I'm going to talk a little bit about as far as modern society is concerned. I don't have to think about a lot of things that potentially affect other people. My wife pretty much hit the generic conversation on the drive down here last night. As far as, and I was like, oh, you don't have to worry about it. She's like, I don't have to think. It's just like about a lot of things. Of course, I'm giving a talk about privilege and I've got other people. It's definitely something that we all forget about. Kind of why I'm here to talk. And I was like, oh, you don't have to worry about it. Quick about me. I am a freelance developer. Obviously focused on WordPress. My company is called Impossibly Creative. It's definitely not something that we all forget about. Kind of why I'm here to talk. I've been a part of the WordPress Orlando group since I'm a freelance developer. Pretty recently changed. I didn't have WordPress yet. It's called Impossibly Creative. Whole blog post on it. And I'm also an accessibility. At the end of the WordPress Orlando group, since there's going to be a little mini lecture at the beginning, but we are actually talking about accessibility yet. So today's focus, we are going to initially define privilege as a concept already. At the end of the we're going to talk about how to take the privileges that we enjoy at the beginning and apply them for good things. And we are then going to take some practice. We are going to take those kind of high concept ideas and apply them to take the privileges that we enjoy at the beginning and apply talk about for good things. What is and we are then going to take some practice. You can take screaming on Twitter all day about high concept ideas. So what is it? It's a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular privileged group. What is and we are then going to take some practice. You can take screaming on Twitter all day about I didn't have to think about it. So what is it? It's a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular group. What is and we are then going to take. But that applies to not just gender, race, sexuality, your financial situation, whether or not you are able-bodied, which I don't think is something not about today. There are all different kinds of privileges available to different groups, and it's a fluid situation, not just gender, because you may be male and white and enjoy certain privileges, situations straight, whether or not you're so able-bodied. Suddenly, a lot of the kind of default set privileges that a lot of people assume on, you don't get those. It's a fluid situation, not just gender. And this image, even though it's slightly problematic, white will enjoy certain privileges. Kind of highlights the whole idea. You have able-bodied, suddenly a white man versus default set privileges that a lot of people just yes, they have to go. They still have to both work. They still have to go the same distance. Even though it's slightly problematic, the pieces in the things in place in life that are working against the woman, like it's not just yes, they have to go. They still she's literally being chained down. They still have to go the same distance. There are things. Everyone has their own challenge. The things in place for some people, their challenges they start on a whole different level. Like it's not just. But this is really important. Privilege is not a free pass. There are some things out there. Everyone has their own challenge. The things in place because some people, someone is privileged or anything like that they don't have to work. That they don't have. That they don't also go through challenges. A lot of privileged people may not hear this concept. But I grew up poor, or yes, that is most certainly the case. Privileged or anything. Everyone has their own challenges. It's just a question of where the additional challenges you have to overcome privilege to get to the same spot. But I grew up poor, and the best way to think about this is the ladder definition. That is most certainly the case. You're all trying to climb the same amount of rungs. It's just a question of where on the ladder do you start in reference to getting to the finish. And the best way to someone is the ladder that grows up poor. We're all trying to climb the same amount as African American. It's just a question of, and female is going to start much lower on the ladder than a middle class white man. It's just that grows up. Society is poor, structured to climb the same amount. Not passing specific judgment on it, but it's just that is the reality. Is going to start much lower on the ladder. And to look at, you can look at this from a middle class white standpoint. It's just homicide is the #2 cause of death for young black women, which is 3 times higher than a white man. Specific judgment on it, but for young black men, 7 times more likely to die before the age of 20 than a white man. Across the board, homicide is the #2 cause of death for young black women. When I'm talking about, like, you start at the bottom, judgment on it, but for young we're talking about people that literally have to fight to survive. Forget about, oh, well, like, whether or not you can go to college or even just finish high school. We're talking about literal life. You start at the bottom as far as how different things can be. People that literally have to fight to survive. So how do we apply these privileges whether or not you can go to those of us that are very privileged, even just finish high school? We're talking about literal because what you do with your privilege matters. How different. Old adage from Spider-Man: with great power comes great responsibility. So how do we apply these? Have the ability to affect those of us that are very privileged. It is on you to use that ability because what you do with your privilege, you can be good or you can be selfish. From Spider-Man: with great power. This image here is intentionally ridiculous to illustrate the point. Those of us that are very privileged. It is on in the story, use that ability. Dinosaur Man, Sauron, has the ability to rewrite DNA on the fly. That would be an instant cure for cancer. This image here, and he says, but I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. In the story, as fun as that sounds, because who wouldn't want to walk around as a has the ability to rewrite DNA on the fly. That would be an instant cure. Maybe not the best use of that technology. He says, but I don't want to cure cancer. I want. So the important thing you need to do about your privilege and about applying your privilege and when you are trying to help is you have to ask the right maybe not the best use of that technology. And there are 2 very key questions here about that. So the important thing you need to do, will the solution you are proposing actually help the people you're trying to help? Trying to help is you have sometimes what you think maybe not the best going to be helpful. There are 2 very key questions out here, in part because it's already been tried before and you just weren't aware of it, or perhaps you're completely unaware of the actual circumstances, like you think you have the information but you don't. Flat out here. And also think about, can this solution that you're proposing be abused by people that have an agenda to actually make things worse? You're completely unaware of the actual circumstances. I'm going to have to kind of, I can't give all the details. And also think about, can this solution that you're proposing be abused by people that have an agenda to actually make things worse? You're completely unaware of the actual circumstances. A couple of years ago, I looked very different on this stage, this exact stage. And also I haven't talked a lot about why that changed. Abused by people that have the main reason why I haven't talked a lot about my full story and why I made certain changes is because I know for certain that if I talk about, oh, well, no, this didn't really work out for me, the main reason why it will feed into an ongoing narrative that is happening worldwide, but particularly in the United States, especially because I know for certain in the press that if I talk about, oh, well, no, this didn't really work out, that my story will be weaponized to hurt other people. It will feed into an ongoing narrative that is happening. Frightfully aware of that. The last thing anybody wants is their name in the news. In the press, that if I personally dealing with it right now, that my story will be weaponized and hurt other people. It will feed into because context is important, and that's right here. Is the last thing anybody wants is their name in the news. Everything that we say obviously has consequences, and you have to think about those consequences. That my story, I made that mistake last week, and paying consequences for it, because context is important in the larger sense. It's important to know, hey, anybody wants somebody take this story? Everything that we say on very consequences, and you have to think about it's like, well, this is why this didn't work for me last week, and then take it to use it and use it to hurt other people that were in my situation, but maybe didn't have the choice. Anybody wants somebody take that didn't have the ability to go, oh, well, maybe I'm going to go this route instead. Well, this is why this didn't work for me. And I will be happy to talk about this in person or even on Twitter. It's just other people that were in my situation that maybe didn't have the choice. Anybody wants somebody take that didn't have the ability to say, oh, well, maybe I'm going to go this route. When you're applying your privilege, you want to use your voice, and I will be happy to talk about raise others. Being an ally is a verb. I'm not going to have a grammatical discussion, just understand that. Being an ally is a verb, not a label. When you're applying your privilege, you want to use your placing the burden of calling out racism, misogyny, sexism, verb. All of these isms and problems that are being an ally is a verb. Placing the burden on the people being oppressed, placing the burden to call it out and to deal with it is part of the problem. It's a large. All of these isms and so if you're at like if you're a freelancer and someone's making sexist roasts in your office, placing the burden to call it out so that's kind of weird. But if you work at a company, whether it's in a distributed company and you're talking in Slack chat, or you're actually in someone's making sexist and you see someone make an inappropriate joke, don't wait for someone that might possibly be if you work at a company to step up and be like, hey, that's not right. A distributed company and you're talking in Slack, take the initiative, or you're actually in someone who making sexist and you see someone make an inappropriate joke, it needs to stop immediately. Don't wait for I'm going to someone that might possibly be not the other person that was actually potentially offended, because more often than not, those people, whether it's a woman, a person of color, or in worst case, a woman, person of color, that person gets the other person that was actually potentially offended, because more often than not, those people, they actually, whether it's a woman, a person of color, or an HR causes problems for them, and ultimately leads to that person gets the other person that was actually because someone else was a jerk. Because more often than not, those and in what ways, whether it's a woman, a person of color, or an HR causes problems for them, and lectures ultimately leads to that person gets. Let's actually take these privileges and put them into actual practice. So the big one that we all overlook is able-bodied HR. I'm able to right now walk across the stage, and I don't have to think about it. Let's actually take these privileges. I haven't seen put them yet because I pretty much came straight to practice. So the big I'm sure that there is at least one person here that is at this camp that is able to right now walk across the stage walking with a cane, and I don't have to think about it. Let's actually take these privileges or has some form of pretty much actual different ableness. So I'm sure that there is at least that person doesn't affect me, and I don't necessarily right now about or walking with a cane, and I don't have to think about it. This affects everyone, whether regardless of their race, gender, national origin, financial situation. I'm sure that disability does affect every single human on the planet in some way, shape, or form at some point in time. This affects everyone, whether perfect example, regardless of their race, gender, national origin, financial situation. You know what I mean? Disability normal every single human. I'm actually a type 2 diabetic, even though I look like I'm in good shape. This affects everyone. At 35 years old, I look perfectly risk, but I figured, when I'm like, you know what I mean? I look normal. I'm actually a type that in and of itself is not so much a disability, I would say, but it is still at 30. It causes me to have to think about things. I look perfectly risk. Most people are like, oh yeah, I can totally have that. Or I can have that. Don't normal. I can't. That in and of itself is not so much a disability,
I would say,
and
but it is still,
it's a problem. It causes me to have to think about things. So this can affect anyone. It's also possibly a legal problem. So legislation's a little iffy right now. There's no full legislation, but there are court cases. Most recently, Domino's got sued. So this can affect anyone. Is required to make their pizza dough accessible for people. Legislation's a little iffy right now. There's no full blind man, but there are tried to use Domino's website to build a custom pizza, and this absolutely tried to do this myself using just the keyboard. It was a disaster. Every major pizza company, it's a background right now. There's no full blind man, but there are tried to use Domino's website. The problem there is the most common argument to that against this man's problem was, why didn't he just pick up every major pizza company? It's background right now. My question would be, why are you assuming that he can speak? The problem there is the most common argument maybe that also against this man's problem was, he can speak, but he can't hear the person talking. Don't make assumptions. My question would be, why are you assuming that accessibility and accessible websites should be the default? Maybe he's also deaf. It is not a negotiation. He can speak, but he can't hear the person. There's a certain irony to that state. Don't make it to me saying that, because my personal website is not accessible. That's actually an accessible website on purpose. My whole thing about like how I'm documenting how I'm going to make the change so that it's much easier to follow. But by default, don't make it to me saying that. Make your sites accessible, and there are some very easy, low-hanging fruit options that we're going to talk about. My whole thing about like how I'm documenting. The first one is color contrast. Black and white used to be kind of the default, but books are printed in black and white, or make your sites accessible. And there are some very easy, low-hanging fruit options that we're going to talk about. That's not the case anymore with the web. The first one is all kinds of colors. Black and white used to be that's fantastic. It makes things look far more interesting, a lot more exciting. We can have little. There are some very easy, so it's fun. That's not the case anymore. But it causes problems. All kinds of colors. For people, particularly people that are that's fantastic. It makes things look far more interesting, a lot more exciting. Actually affects 1 in 8 men. So it's fun. That's not more than, but it causes the entire male population, particularly people that are 3 billion people. That's a lot of people. The standard for color contrast varies a little bit by based on the font size that you're using, but the general rule to follow, if your color contrast is lower than 3:1 or 3.0 in a color contrast checker, you need to do better. The minimum standard is 4.5 for smaller text, but anything larger than 18 pixels, which is not that big, needs to be 3.1 or 3.0. And there are a bunch of color contrast checkers out there. This is the one I use personally from, I believe his name is Jonathan Snook. He's a Canadian developer, so that's why color is spelled weird with a U. And I will tweet out this link specifically later when I am done. And the slides have already been tweeted out as well. Resizable text. How many people remember the first iPhones and first smartphones having to pinch to zoom because you couldn't read anything and nothing resized? And you were like, what is that? This is one of the ways that we can avoid that and give control to the user is allow them to use the built-in accessibility settings on their devices in their browsers so that the fonts automatically resize. The thing is, if you use pixels to define your fonts, and only pixels, so saying font size 16 pixels, it will be locked there, and it won't resize. They will have to pinch to zoom, or they will have to use the zoom feature on their browser. Instead, you want to use relative units. There are a whole bunch of different ones, and they all have different ways they work, but the easiest examples are EMS, REMS, which are pretty much the same thing except for where it comes from, and VW/VH, which stands for viewport width and viewport height. Those can get kind of funky, so personally I tend to stick with either EMS or REMS. Semantic markup. You hear a lot about it lately more from an SEO perspective, but it's actually an accessibility feature. So you want to use the correct element, not just some random div or span. This is because screen readers process this information, and when they see particular elements, they already know, hey, this does a thing. I know how to do this. I can now tell that screen reader user, for example, if it's a link, that you've made a button and you've made it a link with a class of button, that you can then, the screen reader goes, hey, this is a link, and it knows to look for the link address, and then it will announce that to the user. If you just use a div and like a data property, because like I know this is a thing, I just don't get why people do it, none of that stuff works. You have to go through all these other additional options of adding ARIA roles and all of these other things that are completely unnecessary if you just used the right element. It's also, again, good for SEO because the same concept of screen readers in the sense that it's machine readable works for Google search engines. It's the same idea. It's one of the few times where accessibility and good for SEO actually makes sense. The Gutenberg/block editor has this built in. Specifically, when you use Gutenberg and you click the little eye icon at the top, it will give you that little table of contents, and it will show you all of the headings. It will actually also tell you, hey, this heading is out of order. If you use an H2, or I'm sorry, an H3 before an H2, it will tell you, hey, you need to fix that. So, just a couple of the examples. Some of these are new from HTML5, but like the header element, use a header instead of a div. Use a footer element instead of a div. Use an aside instead of a div. Articles instead of a div. Like, notice, no divs. Divs absolutely have their purpose, but the point, kind of the now standard point of a div is we don't have a thing that already describes it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Accessibility it's a relatively simple concept in theory, but there's a lot to it, and there are a lot of very specific situations that are way outside the scope for this talk. One of them, as an example though, is this right here. We have this transcription service, and it's fantastic. It is an accessibility feature, because later, when this video is uploaded to WordPress.tv, we will now have an easy access to everything I've just said, and someone doesn't have to sit there and listen to me talk again. I know. And write down everything I'm saying and upload it to a transcription, because transcriptions, when you have video, are an accessibility feature for people that can't necessarily hear what I'm saying. When you have video on your website, you should have captions. If there's specific audio that is, and there are whole things like decision trees on whether or not, like, your images, do they need alt text? An SEO person is going to tell you, yes, always, because it's searchable. That's not why you should do it. Images don't necessarily need alt text. If they are purely decorative, if they are not used as a key point of the content, or perhaps you're writing a whole thing about like, oh, this is, you're explaining something or you're describing something, and then you show a picture of it, that picture is a progressive enhancement. It's not necessary. So it doesn't need an alt tag, and here's why. For a screen reader, they are literally being read. Everything is being read to them. So they're going to read your paragraph, and then they're going to be read the alt description, and it's going to be, and if it's the same thing, they're going to think something's broken because it's just been repeated to them. And if you want an example of like, oh, well, how difficult is it to use a screen reader? If you have a Mac go into your accessibility settings. And actually, here, let's do that. We're going to go into our accessibility settings, which are under System Preferences, Accessibility, and we're going to turn on VoiceOver.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen.
And then we'll look at something.
VoiceOver on Keynote, developing with privilege window, slide navigator, table, row 21 of 23, selected as keyboard focus, space with Keynote containing windows developing with privilege, full screen space. You are currently on the table. To enter this table, press Control, Option, Shift, down arrow.
So do you want that repeated to you constantly?
System Preferences, Accessibility, window,
And now I gotta figure out how to turn
Features,
it off.
table, VoiceOver, status menu, accessibility menu, 10 items, space with System Preference.
Welcome to VoiceOver.
There we go.
Voice.
Turn it off. There we go. Make it stop. All right. So again, we talked about the legal factors of accessibility. It's a very fluid situation right now. As far as I know, there's not any specific pending legislation, but the country is worried about other things right now. But very quickly, it's going to not be an option. You just won't have an option legally to have an inaccessible website. And right now, if you would deal with hotels, they are very concerned about this. A lot of hotels are already being sued. It's just not in the news. I work with hotels a lot. They deal with it all the time because they're already used to dealing with ADA legislation. So they're acutely aware of this problem, and they're already targets. People sue hotels for not having current ADA requirements. So it's something you have, if you're working on a hotel website especially, it's a concern. And that's it. Any questions? No? There we go.
How about the tool? I mean, most of us aren't experts on this. Is there a place that one student just examines your website and says you need to do X, Y, Z? Is that the first thing?
The best thing to do for the question is what sort of tools are there available for accessibility testing? There are a whole bunch of them. WebAIM, AIM, has a whole accessibility checker. It runs through the standards of the WCAG accessibility standards. The WCAG standards in general can be a little bit like, they feel like legalese, but if they actually have some really good breakdowns of like, oh, this is what you need to do, or hey, don't do this. They have a lot of practical examples, and then those listings also link later to tutorials. Some of the code I've written recently for like the themes I'm building and stuff like that for navigation, I learned about new features that they recommend, specifically things like when you're mousing over a menu and it has a drop down. How many people have been through that scenario where like you move the mouse just a little bit outside it and it just disappears, and then you have to mouse back over and everything like that? There's actually a really simple technique where you just build in a little timer on the mouse out event and just have it wait like a second before it goes away, because it gives you the chance to move back in. Now that seems like a convenience, but for someone with a motor disability like Parkinson's that's using a mouse and their hand starts shaking, having the menu disappear on them constantly is a nightmare. It's a really simple little bit of JavaScript that you can inline into your menus, and it doesn't take a lot of work. And later on, I will tweet out the link to my GitHub where I already have it implemented. Just steal it. It's perfectly acceptable. And there are all kinds of other tools. The contrast checker I mentioned in the slides, which I will also tweet a link out to later. That's another good example of just checking your contrast settings. We good?
How do we get in contact with you?
Oh, yes. There. That is my personal website. My company website is just a coming soon page right now because I'm currently rebuilding it, thanks Gutenberg. And that is my Twitter handle. So any questions or anything like that afterwards, and I'll be here all weekend. So you had a question as well. Oh, great. Any other questions? Yes?
About payment processors, do some of them do that better than others if you're in a commercial site?
You know, I haven't specifically dealt with that as far as payment. The question is, what sort of like how did payment processors deal with accessibility? I haven't. The thing that's immediately coming to mind is the idea of like PayPal buttons. I don't know how accessible they really are. I haven't looked at them because I don't deal with PayPal as a personal preference. But I know like WooCommerce, now, especially now that they're under the automatic umbrella and all of that, like they get a lot more attention. Like the default stuff is kind of built in. A lot of it, unfortunately, is kind of on you as a developer. It's your responsibility to build something that's accessible, even when you're pulling from somebody else. Some development tool providers do give you good stuff, others don't. Honestly, Gutenberg's a perfect example of this. All this hype about Gutenberg, and we were told it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and then it was just dropped on us. One of the reasons people were so upset was the accessibility group was like, wait, it's not ready. And there was a whole, I believe it was WP Campus paid for it, like raised money to pay for a full-on accessibility review of Gutenberg. And it was kind of a disaster. And the accessibility group then took that review and was like, okay, let's fix it. And they've been working on it, and it's getting better every time. Like every new release, there are improvements, but it's still a work in progress. So we're getting there, but WordPress still has a long way to go, and events like these and things like contributor days are a great way to get involved with that and learn more about it. I didn't really become like a big accessibility advocate until I went to the first WordCamp US. And one of my friends that I was there with was like, hey, why don't you, because he was on the accessibility team. He's like, why don't you sit with us for contributor day? And I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't know what else to do, so it makes sense. And then they were like, oh, here's all of these things that you, like, you know that you need to do them because he's been in my ear for, 2 years about it. But, like, here's all these other things that we can fix. One of the bugs that I entered that day as part of Contributor Day didn't get fixed until about 3 months ago. That's how long we've been debating some of these issues. And it was a simple color contrast thing. And it was literally just, hey, the color contrast check fails for these button elements that have been in WordPress since the 3.6 redesign. And there was literally designers arguing over what shade of blue. Like, oh, well, and then, well, how does this affect it? And it's like, and we're talking like 4 years of comments. I think after about the first year, I just turned off the notifications and I was like, somebody else is dealing with this, I'll get to it later. But yeah, it's, like I said, it's a complex issue. Design matters, but also so does accessibility, and how do you balance the two? Like, there are ways to have good design that is accessible, because accessibility is design. It's all part of the same thing. So, seeing a lot of new people that walked in. The fun part is you missed all the nasty, like, angry white guy telling other white people what to do part. But it'll be recorded, and I wrote like 3 blog posts on this whole topic. So you can just, if you're not interested in that part of it and you just want the accessibility part, just read the 3rd part. Any other questions?
Thank you.
No? Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Miami. Yeah. For everyone who came from the north, please bring your winter back to you. Make sure you take it home with you, because I do not like this cold weather. You know, I had to break out my snow boots the other day, so I get to wear them once a year. You know, that's long enough. My name is Gene FELISME. You'll learn more about me a little later. This talk, I'm going to shorten it a little bit so we can get back on track. Don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. You'll still learn everything, and I have a list of resources. The slides will be up on the Slack channel and social media and everything, so you'll be able to find it. And you'll be able to, if I'm here basically all day today, so if anything, you can find me around or reach out to me, and I can answer any questions if I didn't get a chance to in this presentation. So to get started, I'm going to be talking about advanced custom fields and using it with Gutenberg. I'm a little lazy, so from now on, I'm not going to say advanced custom field, I'm just going to say ACF. So hopefully you guys catch on. And I'm trying not to say a lot of acronyms, just for the beginners who are new to development. Just a quick question, how many people been to WordCamp Miami before? All right. What's the new people? How many new people? All right. So I'm hoping you went to the developer workshop yesterday, and I heard a lot of good things. If not, you should get a lot of information today as well. All right. Let's get started. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot I had the slide in there. My talk rocks. You can visit this site on your phone. It's pretty much a little app where you can, talk about me behind my back, pretty much, with the emojis and GIFs and all types of other information. Don't worry, you can be truthful. Just don't be surprised I'll respond back. That's all. All right. So, anyone knows what is ACF exactly? Anyone who doesn't know what ACF is? All right. So, for the people who don't know, basically it is a WordPress plugin. It comes in free and the pro version. It allows you to create custom fields. So basically, if you need the regular WordPress text editor, basically has like the content field and general, very basic stuff. And say, for instance, you want to add another field for author because you don't know how to display authors on your web page for some reason. You can actually create another field and display author. It allows you to use very little code to accomplish this a lot easier. It takes you a lot less time to complete it. So basically what it does, it makes you create these field groups. You go through the process of creating all your fields. You select it where you want it, if you want it for a post, if you want it for pages, if you have a custom post type. If you don't know what a custom post type is, it's pretty much, it's pretty much a way to group another type of content on your website. So you have pages and posts, you can have, I'll show you later, you can have like faculty, you can have staff, you can have a whole bunch of other types of post types. Testimonials, another type of post type that's more popular. So basically you create these field groups and you'll assign those field groups to whatever posts. You can assign them to multiple post types or just one, or you can actually do a lot of other stuff, but I'm not going to go into the details of that. So pretty much these are an example. Wow. Didn't really remember that one right there. This is an example of the fields on the editor of WordPress. So you know this is not Gutenberg, this is just the regular WordPress, but there's a custom post type called applications, and you see the fields in there where people, if you're a content manager for this website and you have to enter people's applications on the website to maybe display it or something else, you can actually put the information in there, and it will be stored onto your WordPress database. And the code for it looks like this. If you know some PHP, it's very helpful. But generally, what it is like get field, the field type of syntax, which works with advanced custom fields. It's quite simple. When we go more into the code, I'll show you. It's nothing to be afraid about. But if you do know PHP, it's kind of helpful, I would say, to get started. Now, the advanced custom fields blocks gets a little bit more advanced. Has anyone created Gutenberg blocks the JavaScript way, which is pretty much using React? Anyone here? Yeah. I have, and we've got one or two others. It is a bit of a learning curve at first, but it's more work. At least in my end, it's more work, especially if I'm already using a tool to display fields, which I have to kind of redo and kind of do the work over again. So I was kind of happy to see that Advanced Custom Fields has a way to do this without having to pretty much rewrite everything in a different way. And on top of that, you have to learn JavaScript. I have a big background in PHP, and I prefer to kind of stay in my lane. But you know, these days everything's JavaScript. Another thing is to use the Gutenberg blocks, the AFC version of Gutenberg blocks. You have to use the Pro version. I would recommend getting the Pro version anyways. It's not crazy expensive. I think it's a one-time pay type of deal still. Not anymore? Ooh, you guys missed out. I'm sorry. So missed out. Yeah, it's still worth it. It's still worth it. It's still worth it. But, man, glad I got it early. So you got to use the Pro version, and I would recommend using it. It opens up a lot of other fields as well. So just for your knowledge. So for the Gutenberg blocks, I'm pretty much prefacing that you guys know what Gutenberg is at this point in time, especially if your website's up to date. Gutenberg, so I'm not going to go in detail about it, but Gutenberg blocks allow you to pretty much create repeatable blocks or bring their content into the Gutenberg itself. So whatever type of blocks you're creating, you kind of just click on the button, select that block, display it, fill out the fields, and it'll display right there and then. So the first part of this is getting your code in order. This can get messy, just like anything else, and as a responsible developer, I would recommend that you actually just don't throw this code anywhere. A lot of people like to throw code in the function file. For you, not do that because if I have to come in after you, now I have to do this search and find and clean up your mess. I'm going to be highly upset. And if I can find you in the streets, we'll have problems. So first thing you have to do is register your Gutenberg block. And to do that, it's quite simple, I would say, at least in my end. And all it is you're doing, you're calling you're creating a function. And you're using the Advanced Custom Fields hook, and all it is hook it into WordPress. And basically what you're doing is registering the block, you're adding a name, a title, you're putting in function, several other information like the way you want to format it and everything. Don't worry, you don't need to take pictures, like I said, into WordPress slides. And basically what you're doing is registering the block, you're adding a name, a title, but you're pretty much just quite simple to get this information all set up the way you want. This code is pretty much something you don't worry, you do over and over. You make some changes, you add some different items to the array. But it's quite simple. You're adding a name, a title. But this is just going over more of the information that actually goes in there, like keywords. You can actually include your styles and scripts in there as well. So if your blocks need to display differently from what it's actually there, you can do it that way as well. But this is just going over more of the information that actually goes on there, like keywords. You can actually do it that way. You can actually select certain pull changes. Add your blocks. I need to display differently from what the next thing you have to do is create a field group. That way as well. Like I spoke about earlier, a field group just allows you to have your set of fields grouped up. And pretty much the key point of that is where the rules is at. It shows it right here. You have to make sure you select blocks. That's pretty much the one key factor in this field group. If you don't select blocks, Advanced Custom Field, ACF, won't know what you're talking about. All right, and then you have to render and display it. To render and display it, once again, it's still a little simple. Yeah, it's pretty much a block of code. Let's go a little deeper. This is the main point. I actually prefer to write my code exactly the same. Pretty much I create all my variables, which is taken from the Advanced Custom Fields, and then you can just use some HTML and a little PHP to fill in the rest of the area in there. I'm not going to go deep dive into this code because you guys need to see the other speakers. All right? And I'll walk through this in a little bit. Oh, this. Oh, I thought it was going to autoplay. No? Just play this real quick. Pretty much after everything's said and done, it does this whole thing. And you can, like you see, the testimonial, you can put in some information, put in the name, the role. This is a testimonial version, and add a photo. Right? It's quite simple. It's easy to use. It works with Gutenberg. It stays within the editor. They even changed the background color. My version looks a lot uglier than that. Just fair warning. All right? So I'm going to do a live demo. For time purposes, it's not really live. I'm just going to give you the heads up. It's live in a way, but it's not really live. All right? I actually sat there and kind of cleaned some stuff up, but you'll get to the point, and I'm going to walk you through it so you have a better understanding. Oh, that's right. So, pretty much, let me start off here. I'm not sure if you guys can see this clearly. Just to be sure. It zoomed out. Like I said, most of this code is already set up, and I put it in a test development site. But what I'm doing here is pretty much, I should be on Do Not Disturb. Everyone's trying to reach me. So what you're seeing here is actually the custom block, but let's start off with a function file. This is the way I prefer to code up my any website. Anything custom, I kind of take it, separate it, or I create a plugin. My way of doing things, if I know it's going to be part of the theme, is in the function file, I'll just require it and pretty much create its own separate file. This is pretty much one of the best. Well, I don't know. It's a good practice. I'm not sure it's the best practice, but it's a good practice to do. And in that Inc. folder, you see the includes folder, it's custom blocks. And what you see here is that I register the block, right? And this is a testimonial version like you seen earlier in the little video rendering. And then I actually created another registered, which is the faculty, which is the one I'm actually going to show you today. And what this block do is we'll pull in my field groups for my faculty and staff, and we'll display it in the Gutenberg block. And I'll walk you through the rest of that. Where's this at? Oh, wow, this got knocked out. So in the field group, I went to pretty much custom fields, field groups. You'll notice I have a faculty and staff block, and I actually gave the name. I put block in front so that way I know there's a block. I have another faculty and staff field group, in there. I separated them so that way it makes it a little easier for me to find, and if anyone else comes behind me, they'll be able to find it as well. So I put in the fields, I put in name, title, photo, bio, and social. So with the advanced custom fields, pretty much, it's just a field. You put a field, I tell it I need plain, just a regular text. You have some other options. I did throw in a little trick in here for social. So social, I use a repeater field. In advanced custom fields, the repeater field allows you to use a group of fields over and over again on the admin side. Well, pretty much in the editor. And I'll show you when we get to that point. Now, after I created the field group here, I actually went to the block side of things and created this file. I put it under blocks, and pretty much I'm coding up everything. So those fields you've seen that I created, I'm trying not to have this put you in a whirlwind. All the fields I created here, you notice that this made a copy. All the fields I created here, I actually coded it up in here. So what I did is created some variables in PHP, and I put in the fields. I used get field, let it know that, hey, pull this variable name, title, photo, bio. Ooh, social is missing from there. Like I said, this is not live, but it works. It works. And I used a variable, then I just went in. First, I actually did some HTML, and then I went back and followed up with some PHP, and pretty much I just wanted to display, to get attachment, a medium photo for the photo, pull in the title, and then social media. This is actually the repeater field. That's all here. So the social media fields I have is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can do whatever else. Oh, there's Facebook in there too. Oh, yeah, I said that earlier. And it's quite simple. It's just a couple of fields right there. Oh, that makes sense why I didn't call it a variable there. Now, I called it here. All right. So with all that said and done, now to the fun part. So I created a post. I call it test faculty blocks. And now I need to add a block. Add a block. I added an icon that says faculty staff on there. I click on it. By default in the code, I actually tell it like, hey, put this default image, put this default name. I do this because the people I used to work for, you need to give them a template, something they know and see. So I put in default name, images, and little description so that way they can see it. If not, they'll constantly call me and ask me how to do things over and over. But what I can do in here is go in, type in my name, put in my title, right? I can add an image, and as you can see, like some of this stuff is changing as I do it. Let's add an image. I had an image in here. Right? Makes the changes. Bio. Right? Just another dev guy. And I can actually add the social, and this is what I was talking about, the repeater field. It allows me to keep adding multiple fields. If I want to add another set of social media stuff, I can keep adding this stuff over and over again. Let me actually collapse this bar. Oh, that didn't help. But you can constantly keep adding stuff over and over again here. For now, I'm just going to put in, this should still display. And I'm going to remove this row. Now if I hit update, what it'll do, oh, I could have hit preview. It should show this on the page. So it pretty much shows this block. Don't worry about how the image looks. I had some CSS work to do. I just didn't have the time to fix that. But this is pretty much the live demo. Everything pretty much works. If I had to do multiple people in there, like all the links work if they were set up. If I had to do multiple people in there, or I'm just going to duplicate this, right? Let's do the preview. And it should show me like 2 times back to back. I set it up in the code to like display it a certain way, certain type. I'm not sure what's going on with the internet here. All right. So pretty much that's the gist of it. Sorry I couldn't go into too much great details on this version, but I will be at WordCamp Jacksonville, which the presentation for this talk should be about 3% better. You know, just to give you, I actually might do a live demo there that actually come out a lot better. There was a few things that changed that made this demo a little different. But you can definitely reach me on social media. My website is a mess, so you can go in there and take a look. I work on projects. I'm a software developer for Fracture. You can visit there at fractureme.com. And I do a lot of WordPress stuff, but I also do a lot of JavaScript stuff too. So another thing is that, all the resource links are here. If you want a deeper dive, you'll see that I stole some stuff or borrowed some stuff that's already out there. But it did a better job than I did, so I borrowed it. Also, my old employer, I used to work here at FIU, is looking for a web developer too, which is my old position. It is a great job. It is great to work here. The compensation package is amazing. I can go into the hospital, pull out my insurance card, and people will pick me up and carry me out. Oh, no problem. Yeah, it's pretty much my name, FELISME, with, I use .me, so it's a play on my name. It redirects to genefelisme.com. So any questions, I can take them. Go ahead. The version, which is a little simpler, is actually should be in Slack already. They should post it on social media. If not, I'll make sure I'll put it on social media, and if you do the hashtag WPMIA, it'll show up on the top. I'll do that right now, actually. All right? Definitely, I think most people want these links than anything else. I don't think my presentation is what, I'm sorry, is what you really want. Oh, no problem. See, it's up close. Believe me, I know. I couldn't find my clicker. I probably should have put my glasses on, but thank you for that. Any other questions? Yeah. No, you can actually edit within the editor. It takes a bit of a trick, and it's actually not like the default version of it. Actually, yeah, don't edit it. I did this as a test for the department, and actually, no one actually liked it too much. So I was able to find a trick to actually put it in the editor so they can just pretty much type it out right there. Does that require using JavaScript then, or is it? Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. It might be a better way. I just did it the JavaScript way. It wasn't too much though, so it worked out. Yeah. Oh, that's VS Code, and yeah, Visual Studio Code. It's the web coding editor. I switched over like a year ago. Yep. You know what? I haven't tried it, but I would think so because I do have sites that uses Gutenberg, and it will show underneath there. Like if you have SEO Yoast, I think a while ago Yoast had their fields underneath that Gutenberg editor, like as like a drop down. It pretty much works pretty much the same. Yeah. Generally, that's what I do. I disable if I need a page outside of using a custom post type. But if for pages at least, I disable the Gutenberg for pages, and I just use the advanced custom fields. Yeah, it just for me, it's just a lot easier doing that way than having them both there. It confuses people sometimes, and I deal with people who are not. They're technical. They can use Facebook, but if they have to do too much to do anything, it's not necessary. Any other questions? All right, one last thing I would like for you guys to do is that if you see any volunteers, sponsors, speakers, please, from a distance, don't give them a hug or shake their hands or anything, but let them know from distance, like, we appreciate you. You're doing an awesome job because, people got colds and illnesses and all types of stuff around here. Thank you. Guys, enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Okay. Oh, okay. Hi, y'all. Okay, cool. Anybody want any water? We got plenty. No, I'm kidding. Real quick, before I get started, has anybody actually seen me talk before? Raise your hand. Good. Only about half of you, okay? Because I only have 4 jokes. They're the same 4 jokes I tell every year. So those of you who have heard them, please laugh so the rest of them know that it was a joke. My name is Cal Evans. For the past 16 so years, I have been a cheerleader for the PHP community. You're welcome for that mental image. But I do a lot of talks about PHP all over the world, and this is one of my favorite ones. Okay. Called The Elephant's New Tricks. Now, this talk is not designed to teach you anything new. These slides are not currently available, but if anybody wants them, if you will drop me an email, cal@calevans.com, I'll send you a PDF of them. The reason there's not available is there's about 10 different versions of this talk, and there's actually about 90 slides in this deck. So, but we're not going to go through all of those. Anyhow, with PHP 7, other than the speed improvements, and every version of PHP 7 has gotten a little bit faster. It's been wonderful. But beyond just that, we've got a lot of new things. And so my point here is not to educate you and you're going to go away with actionable intel in this one because I've only got a short amount of time. What I'm hoping that you'll come away with is inspiration, that you'll find something that you didn't know was possible and you'll go back and you'll experiment with that. So with that having been said, let's kick it off. We're going to talk, first of all, about errors. Now, this hit a lot of people when they moved to PHP 7, and I got news for you. I'm going to show you PHP 8 is not going to be any friendlier. Wow. Okay. That got, the light just hit me there. Everything in PHP is moving away from e-error, e-warning, all of these things, and into errors. And errors are like exceptions. If you're using exceptions, you understand how to use errors. But everything's moving away from that. And this is a good thing because we're getting away from the 2 bad things about PHP, which is either white screen of death or log spew. Because, you know, every user knows what to do with log spew, right? I still go to banks and stuff like this and see ASP log spew. And I'm like, have you not figured out how to fix this? Anyhow, so here's an example, okay? We've got a method called, we've got a function called called method, and it takes something. We don't know what. We'll talk about that in a minute. And on that, we assume that's an object because we have it named obj, but it could be passing in a string. And if we've got a string or a null, and we're trying to call method, I'm really creative here, okay, on our object, if that's not actually an object, you're going to get a fatal error right now in PHP, okay? Worst case scenario, you call it actually with a null. Now, nobody would actually call it with a null, but if you call it with a variable that is initialized as null unknowingly, that's going to cause you a problem. Your code's going to end right there. Nothing you can do. In PHP 7, starting in 7, we can now catch this. We can put this in a try-catch, and we catch, see how I've got backslash error there? Because I'm namespacing, and everybody should be namespacing at this point. But I want the engine version of error. And now I can gracefully shut down. I got news for you. If I'm calling a method on a null, I got big problems right there. I'm not going to fix this like if it was an exception and we can fix things sometimes. I'm not going to be able to fix this, but I can gracefully shut down. I can notify somebody, okay? I can send out an email to the DevOps team. If it's between 2 and 4 a.m., I can page my boss because, that's always fun. Things like that. I can gracefully shut my program down without white screen of death or log spew, which is always good. Now, errors are on the same level as exceptions, okay? We've got a new thing called the throwable interface, and that implements all the stuff that used to be an exception, and they've moved that up to the throwable interface, and errors and exceptions both implement this throwable interface. And we have some already built for us: argument count, arithmetic, assertion, division by 0, parse error, and type error. We're going to talk about types in a little bit. We're going to camp on types for a while. But type error is going to become your friend, hopefully, if you're doing a lot of object-oriented PHP. You're going to need to understand that one. Here is the key. You cannot subclass errors like you can with exceptions. Exceptions, we subclass exceptions all the time and make, just little flags. Did this happen? I want to catch this. I want to do something different than if that happened. Errors cannot be subclassed. You catch an error, that's it. The exception subclass is at the same level as the error, and you can do userland subclasses. Now, I'll give you a hint. Most of my programs are CLI based, okay? I use the Symphony console, and that has one little line that says app run, okay? I wrap that in a try-catch and catch \throwable. That means if my program has not caught any exception or any error, and it bubbles all the way up to the top, that's going to catch it no matter what it is. And I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to recover or anything at that level, but at least I can log it and I can make a note, hey, I've got a problem here, I need to fix that. So you can catch the /throwable interface and as your catch of last resort. Okay, multiple exception catching. Several times, especially within exceptions, you've got catch this exception, do this. Catch this exception, do this. And you might have 3 or 4. You got different exceptions, but you're doing the same thing on each one of them. Well, now we can catch this exception or that exception. Actually, that's not or. This exception, pipe, that exception. And we can catch multiple exceptions and do something. Okay, so if you've got 2 or 3 catch blocks that do the same exact thing, but the exception's different, you can now chain those together. Now, this is both good and bad, okay? The good is, this is less code we have to write. The bad is there's no practical limit in PHP to how many of these you can chain together, okay? That's bad because very quickly you can write unmaintainable code. Don't look at me like that. Everybody's written that kind of code before. I've got whole projects that are named unmaintainable. Okay, here's something coming in PHP 8. I shared this slide on Twitter the other day and scared the bejesus out of about half of the PHP developers on Twitter. In PHP 8, these things are all going to go from e-warnings to throwing an error, which means instead of just bugging you in your log file, it's now going to shut down your code unless you're catching it, okay? So, in dev, go turn e-all on. If you don't have it on, you should be developing with e-all on. Go look for all your e-warnings. Go start fixing those things now. Because come November, you'll be ready to move to 8, where everybody else will be going, what's this? Why is this not working? Type errors instead of e-warnings. Division by e0 is now going to be a catchable error that we can catch. And undefined variable is going to be an error instead of an e-notice. That's going to trip up a lot of people. That is the most shared Twitter tweet that I've had in like a month. So it scared a lot of people. Okay, type hinting. We've had type hinting for a while in PHP. Back in 5.6, I think is when we first got one. You could type hint with classes, your own classes. In 7, we got scalar type hinting, the basic building blocks of PHP. Int, bool, there's 8 of them. We'll go over them in just a second. And now we can do this, but it is wholly optional. You don't have to do it, but if you learn how to do this, you can actually learn how to write better code and write less code. Type hints serve one important purpose to us as people, and that is that they help us write self-documenting code. Now, I'm a huge fan of PHP Documenter, and I put doc blocks at the top of all my functions. And I'm one of those that I'll stub out a function, and I'll write a doc block, and I'll say, this function is going to take these 3 inputs, it's going to return this, it's going to throw this, and I'll honestly mean it at that time. Well, a month later, when I actually start writing the code for that function, I'm like, oh no, I forgot. It's not going to take this input, it's going to take that input. And I'll change my method, but I won't change the doc block. The doc block is always getting out of date. And this is a failing of mine. I realize that. Y'all probably never, ever have this problem, but this is my problem. Well, now we can write self-documenting code, code that we don't have to have doc blocks. Now, I still put a doc block at the top of them, but it usually only contains the description of the method. And by the way, if your method is send email, please don't make your doc block this sends an email. Okay, give me a little more. Okay. Oh, there's our 8 type hints, because as of 7.1 we got one more. Int, float, string, bool, array. callable, iterable, and object, okay? Those are what they call the scalar. When you hear people talk about scalar types, that's what they mean. You can still use your own classes. None of this affects type hinting with classes or anything like that, but this is the new type hints. Okay, let's take a practical example. I've got a method here called post. Post takes two parameters, URL and payload. Now, if that's all I know, I'm either reading that doc block or I'm reading the code, because I don't know how to use this yet. I don't know what URL is, I don't know what payload is, I don't know what it gives me back. That's all I've got. Well, with type hinting, I can say URL is a string. Okay, now I know it's not expecting an array of parsed URL parts, that it wants a string for my URL. We're doing good here. Payload is an array. Okay, so I'm probably using guzzle HTTP, and that's going to be my JSON post there. I now know how to use this. I now don't have to read the code to use this method. I can use it right as it is because I now have all the information, or most of the information I need to use this. Here's the important part though. I said this when type hintings first came out. I made the statement that type hinting will save us from having to write tests. And the author of a very prominent framework just called me to task and went all over me about the fact that it doesn't have anything to do with unit testing. And he was absolutely right, but that's not what I said. I've been programming 36 years. Every method that I've ever written starts with what I call the if-onlys. If this is not what I'm expecting, then I can't process anymore. I need to exit, or I need to tell somebody you didn't give me what I needed. If URL is not a string, throw an exception. Because I had to handle that, okay? Now PHP handles that for us. That's code I don't have to write because the engine is now doing that for me. As long as I've got strict typing turned on. We'll go over that in a minute. Declaring strict typing only affects the scalar typings, okay? If you're already using your own classes in there, turning strict typing on is not going to have any effect. Strict typing reduces the overall amount of code that you have to write because you no longer have to check to make sure things are correct. The engine's going to do that for you. And the engine's not going to, in some cases, the engine is actually going to throw a compile time exception so you can catch it before it gets to the user. When PHP enforces your type hints, you don't have to. Okay. This is the secret sauce. At the top of every file that you want strict type hinting turned on, you have to put this declare statement. It has to be the first thing right under the open PHP tag, okay? That's non-negotiable. The reason it's like this is on purpose. You may not yet be ready to use type hinting. But a lot of the libraries that you install via Composer, and I'm hoping a lot of you are using Composer, a lot of those libraries are already using it. But they can use it by turning it on in their files and not force you to have to use it. So they get the benefit of it. When you're ready to do it, you can turn it on and you can enjoy the benefit as well. But that has to be turned on for every file. It does not cascade down. You cannot turn it on in index.php and assume it's going to work everywhere. Got to be turned on manually. Okay. So, code time. I've got declare strict types, very first thing. I've got my function sum, which takes two parameters, A and B. By the way, single letter variables, that's what we call a career limiting move, kids. Okay, if you're new to programming, don't do this. Uncle Cal knows this, knows better. But we take two parameters, A and B, and we simply return the sum of them. Fairly easy to read. Now, if I've got strict typing turned on, it's going to come down here, it's going to say echo all ints, sum 1, 2, it's going to give me 3. It's going to say echo all floats, it's going to throw a type error at that point. Strict typing's turned on, I'm handing in a float. The next thing it's going to do is hit the get message, but because we are able to catch this error, it's also going to finish out the code. I knew in this case that it wasn't important, so I went ahead and finished out. I could have also thrown another error after I notified my user, done whatever I wanted. Now, if I have strict typing set to 0, then it's going to say all ints, I'm going to get 3. It's going to say all floats. Anybody got any ideas what we're going to get there? Anybody? Huh? No. Because strip typing is turned off, then PHP is going to continue to execute that, but because you provided type hints, it's going to attempt to coerce the values that you passed in into what it's expecting. So we're passing in 1.5 and 2.5, it's seeing 1 and 2, it's still going to say 3. Okay? The normal rules for PHP coercion exist. Everybody knows, PHP will convert a string with the numeral 2 into an integer value 2. That's called coercion. So the normal values apply. Even if you don't have it turned on, if you've type hinted, PHP is going to try to help you along. Okay? Oh, it's not going to execute the error because there is no error, and we're still going to hit done. Nullable type hints. A lot of people say this is when type hints actually got usable. We got nullable type hints in 7.1. See the question mark? The question mark says I'm either going to pass in a null or a string. Okay? And on array, that's a null or payload. At this point, you're saying, if you're writing this code, you're saying, I, as the programmer, am assuming the responsibility of making sure that the program's going to operate correctly, even if there are null values in there. So, there's plenty of good reasons why you should do this, but you're assuming the responsibility for dealing with it. Anybody ever got the dry cleaner bag back and it says, this is not a toy? Okay? That's not the reason this slide's in there is because somebody asked. This is not a toy. Nullable type hints are not the same as specifying a default value. Okay, we all know in PHP, if you've got 3 parameters, the first one you gotta have. The second one, it'd be nice to have, but if not, then we can specify a default value. The third, nice to have, but you specify a default value. Just putting that question mark there is not the same thing as specifying a default value. It's saying you can pass in a null, but you still gotta pass in something. In my post, both string and payload are nullable. Post with just a null, that works because payload has a default value. Post with 2 nulls works because they're both nullable. Post with a null and then a string throws a type error. Object. I used to hate this. I used to say, there's no sense in doing object, okay? I've gotten to the point where I use it quite a bit these days, and I'm very ashamed to admit it, because object is so wide as to almost be unusable for anything, because all you know is it is an object. You don't know that it has any methods or parameters, but you do know that it is an object, so you know how to deal with it. In my payload or in my post, if I say object, payload is now an object, then I can actually say JSON decode with an empty array, and that's going to provide me an empty object. But in reality, any object will do. As long as you understand that, as long as you understand that anything will work there, and that you'll assume the responsibility for taking any parameter in, or any object in, then any old object will do there. Return type hints. Now, we talked about parameters and everything, but now we're getting into return type hints. This is where things get fun. Now, I've got my post, and I'm taking a string, and I'm taking an array, and I'm going to return back a string. Now, I don't need that dot block at all, because I know what I need to call it, and I know what PHP is going to give me back. I used to say that return type hints were a contract with the deity of your choice because they were absolute and irrefutable. You could not change them. That's actually changed in PHP 7.4, as we're going to see in just a minute. But the normal rules do apply, and if you, or PHP will attempt to coerce if strict typing is turned off on return variables. So, if I have a class foo and I've got my function post and it's returning an int now, not a string, and I return a string, this is going to throw me a type error. Thankfully, I can catch a type error and I can deal with that, but this is no longer allowable. Type hints can be nullable as well. This allows us to say I'm either going to return what I'm specifying or a null. Not the same as void. We'll talk about void in a minute. But see, I can say question mark string, and now I can return Cal was here, or I can return null. Not just return semicolon, but I can return null, and that's going to work as well. So if I don't have anything to return back, this is valid. Void. There we go. Void is very useful. I've gotten to that point. I used to be to the point where, I used to be one of those programmers that every method returned something, and usually it returned a Boolean, did it work or not. With exceptions and errors these days, I don't find that very necessary. I can throw exceptions and deal with problems and stuff like that. And so I got to the point where I wasn't returning anything, and at some point I just stopped putting return statements in there. Void now allows me to continue to do that and type hint it and say, this method's not going to return anything. Now, return null is actually returning something. That's not a void, okay? But if you just don't have a return statement at the end, that's a void. Now, if you specify void, you cannot have a return statement that returns anything at all anywhere in your code, okay? You can't have a return statement and a catch that returns an integer value or a Boolean or anything like that. All of your return statements have to have, or if you have them in there, have to simply be return semicolon, okay? Sorry, I just blew out somebody's ears on this listening. Return types cannot be, or void return types cannot be nullable, okay? This is another one of those this is not a toy questions. Somebody actually asked me, well, can I have a nullable void? No. Void is nothing. Null, I'm an old database, okay, I'm an old programmer, but I'm an old database programmer, and null actually means something to me. Null means I don't know what this is, but it's supposed to be something. And void is there is nothing here. And you can't return I don't know what this is or void. So no, you cannot do this, okay? I cannot say question mark void. And of course, if it says void, I can't return anything at all. This is going to give us a compile time error. Typed properties. This is new in 7.4. I'm so excited because up to this point, we've been talking about method signatures, parameter types, and return types. Now, our properties in our classes can have types. These slides are organic and have grown over about 4 years, so that's why my code samples kind of fluctuate back and forth in style. But this is new. I can now say public integer ID and public string name. And the normal rules of type hinting now apply here. I can't apply a string to my int or my ID property, and I can't apply a int to my name property. A couple really important things. First of all, types on static properties are also supported. Void and callable are not allowed for typed properties, okay? With strict types equals 1, this is, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be strict types equals 0. It is coercive, it is not strict, just like we talked about before. And non-private properties are invariant, meaning you can't change them. Once you have defined them, subclasses cannot change them. Now, here's one very important thing that you got to understand. Let's go back up here. See where I said public int equals ID? Okay? If strict typing's on, when I define this, my ID property is set to null because I have not initialized it. Okay? That's not a problem until I go to read it. If I go to read it and this is not a nullable property, like it doesn't have question mark int, then I'm actually going to get a type error because I've specified int, but I've not initialized it with an integer, so this PHP is going to throw an error. Two ways around this. First of all, you can initialize it right there. Equals 0, boom, I'm done. Or in my constructor, see how I'm initializing them? At that point, we're good, okay? But if you don't initialize those, you could run into problems. So if you're using strict typing properties, please initialize those properties. Okay, invariants. I've got class A. It's got private, public, public. Okay, and A is a Boolean, B is an integer, C is a nullable integer. Well, down here, I change A to a string. Well, that's allowed because A was private up there. So I'm changing it to public, and I can change it to a string. If I extend C from B, I can't change it again because now it's public. Public int B is not allowed, or nullable B is not allowed, and taking the nullable off C is not allowed, okay? Once these typed properties are defined, they cannot be changed unless they're private to begin with. Yep. Okay, I've covered those. Covariant returns and contravariant parameters. Big words brought to us from the people that gave us dereferencing arrays. These are difficult terms to deal with. They're easy concepts, okay? As of PHP 7.4, none of this applies to anything below 7.4. As of 7.4, a return type can substitute a child type or a subtype. So your return types can go down, okay? If I've got user and I've got employee that is a subclass of user, I can change that return type to in a subclass to my employee. It can only go down. My interface factory, I have a function called make. In my class, I implement factory, and function now returns a user because user is an object. Everything's an object, or all objects would pass the object, so that's safe. It goes down. Contravariant parameters, the exact opposite. Parameters go up. You can pass in a parameter or any of its parents, but not any of its children. My interface is concatable. My function concat takes an iterator. When I actually implement it, I actually pass in iterable because iterator is a concrete class. Iterable is a type, but iterator implements iterable. So I can go up with parameters, I can go down with return types. That's all it means. I don't understand why they had to make word terms in it nobody can understand, but that's what it means. Okay, by the way, because I'm having to blow through this real quick, I'm here all day and most of tomorrow. If anybody has any questions, if we run out of time, find me. I'm happy to sit down and talk through any of these. I'll pull these slides up and we can talk through them, any of it you want. Okay, null coalesce operator. I'm excited about this one. I love this one. I've used it so much since it came out, I believe in 7.2, because as a database person, like I said, I've been using nulls for an awful lot of times, but we all know what happens when we concatenate a string and a null. We end up with a null, okay? Well, now we can always get around that with that string equals is set my string, either my string or an empty string. Well, now we've got some syntactic sugar with the double question mark that just simplifies that. These two do the exact same thing, with one exception. If my string doesn't exist, we don't have to test for it if we're using the null coalesce. The null coalesce operator will not throw an error or a warning or anything if my string doesn't exist. It understands that its job is to deal with the fact that it doesn't exist. So that's the one thing. Now you can chain these down. If you've got 3 or 4 different options that you want to try before you default to an empty string, then you can say my string, double question mark, this string, double question mark, that string, double question mark, empty string. Okay? Same thing with chaining exceptions. There's no practical limit that PHP sets, but on the other hand, you can very quickly write some unmaintainable code. So be careful with that. Yep, okay. Preloading. I'm excited about this one. This is new in 7.4. Anybody using opcache? Anybody? Okay, a couple of people. If you're using opcache, then you know that everything gets loaded in and pre-compiled into opcode, but it doesn't get, it doesn't do all the linking and everything. And if you change something on the file, then PHP goes through and looks at everything and says, has anything changed? Let me reload that. With preloading, we get two things. Number one, when you load a class, it compiles the class, any parents of the class, any traits, any interfaces, any of that, brings all that opcode cache together and puts it in memory, and it stays there. Okay, it doesn't check to see if anything has changed. That's one of the time savings that we get out of this. Is it doesn't change to see if the file, it doesn't check the timestamp on the file to say, oh, should I reload this? If you're preloading, and you can't, using opcache is not the way you preload. We've got a new thing with preload. We got a new command with preload. But if you're preloading your classes, then they're in memory, and they're in memory for the entire server. So if you're on a shared hosting, you cannot use this. If you're, on the other hand, if you're running your own instance of EC2 or your own DigitalOcean Droplet or whatever, you can preload your most commonly used classes. And this speeds things up a lot. Now, you don't want to, you can actually preload all of WordPress. If you've got the RAM set aside for your web server, you can preload the entire WordPress code base. You don't get a lot of savings by doing that. What they found out is you preload your top 100 classes, the most used classes, and that's going to get you the majority of the savings. Oh, this is by Dimitri. Dimitri's a good friend of mine. He's over in Russia. Used to work with me at Zend, but he's responsible for most of what you see, the speed improvements in PHP 7.4. Not available in shared hosting. This is what that looks like. The first thing I do is bring up my autoload PHP because I'm using Composer. I create me a list of files that I want preloaded, and then I run it. Now, PHP is only going to run this one time when the server comes up. That's it. After that, you have to actually bounce Apache or Nginx or whatever you're using to get these to change. So if you run update on WordPress, you're going to have to bounce your web server for this to take place. Okay, one more thing. PHP 8. With PHP 8, we get two things that I'm going to talk about. First is union types. Now, I work a lot with the WordPress REST API, and it used to drive me up the wall that the WordPress REST API is going to return one of two things. It's either going to return to you a REST payload, which is what I really want, or a WordPress error. It's not going to put the error in the payload for me. So I've got to deal with one of two different types, and that means I can't type hint a lot of stuff. Now I can, because I can say my parameter is going to be either a foo or a bar, and my return is going to be either an int or a float. Okay? Chainable type hints, it's going to make working with the REST API for me a whole lot easier. If you work with the : class, if you use that a lot, that's now available not just on the class, but on objects. And I've got 1 minute left, so I'm going to blow through this one real quick. Just-in-time compilers. Now, I write a lot of stuff in the command line, and I've actually written programs written in PHP that have run for 3 months at a time. Okay? This is not going to give WordPress instances much of a bump, maybe 10%. Okay? But for programs that run a long time, it's going to give a tremendous increase to it because the compiler or the language can say, oh, I've done this before. And about the 6th or 7th time it hits a method and it runs that method, it says, obviously this is an important method. Let me go ahead and optimize this and put it in memory. And it'll just keep doing that. And the more it does this, the faster my code gets. Just-in-time compiler is actually available in PHP 7.4. If you're running 7.4 in your development environment and want to turn it on, it is an option, a compile time option. You can recompile PHP, turn it on, and see if your code will actually speed up. They're telling us that 10 to 15% is going to be about average for most websites, but long-running processes will be faster. With that, I am absolutely out of time. I am sliding in under the wire for the next speaker. Hang on just a second. There we go. I always like playing with the photographers. Anyhow, I'm here all day. I'll be hanging out over in the main area, the quad, or where the vendors are. If you find me, please come ask me questions. I'll pull these slides up on my laptop. We can go over any questions you might have. Thank you for your time. You've been a wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. There you go. Let's see.
Next, we're going to be hearing from HERCHEL, who's going to be talking about web performance. Very interesting topic that I'm sure we're all interested in. He's going to be talking about techniques
Play the Miami Vice thing. All right, that didn't work too well. But how do I get my slides up? Do I gotta like plug in? Is there HDMI or something like that? How does that work?
Right here.
Oh, right there. Gotcha. Try this one. Hey. Hi, everybody. So, before I get started, I'm going to set a timer. Set timer for 28 minutes. Because I'm definitely going over. So, this is front-end web development performance, which is really important. So in this session, we're gonna talk about why make web pages fast, and what that means. We're gonna talk about how browsers work, because that's important, and we're gonna use that information to measure performance, and we're gonna do some tips and tricks to optimize each of those stages within the as your browser's rendering the web page. And we're going to tie all that into WordPress. So this is me, that's my daughter, and that's my dog. This is actually the dog that I love the least. I have another one named Coco that didn't make this picture, but Dexter's pretty cute. I work for a company called Lullabot. Lullabot is a design strategy development company. We work with a lot of large clients. And there's this website called mytalk.rocks, and you can go there and it looks exactly like this. You can give Cal claps and things like that. You can also do that for me. I'm honestly, like, when I saw this website, I was like really happy that there was no poop emojis, because I would probably get a bunch of those. So everybody who's in here is probably already, you're here for a reason. You're here because you like fast websites and you maybe recognize the value in that. But when we're talking about fast websites, a lot of people will talk about things like, database queries, PHP execution time, and things like that. But it's important to keep in mind that 80 to 90% of the actual time before your user can see something, that's spent on the front end. That's the browser doing work, looking at the HTML, downloading stuff, and things like that. And this is like critical for the success of your website. There's tons of stats out there that I don't have enough time to go through, but like some of them are pretty pretty important, you know, like people will abandon your websites if it takes a long time. And I do this all the time, because for me the most important stat is that I just really hate them. Like, I hate slow websites. At my core, I'm very, very impatient. So part of this, talking about this up here, is kind of scratching my own itch right here. So let's talk about what that means. Like, what does fast mean? That could mean different things for different people. Well, I put together this very, very cool animation that shows. Bam. All right. So we talk about front-end performance metrics, and you hear terms like time to first byte, time to first meaningful paint, time to first interactive, and speed index. And you're like, well, what the heck does that even mean? You know, these are some technical things right here. So I'm going to explain these to you because they're all a little bit different right here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is time to first byte. And this is when you hit the link or you hit enter on your keyboard, and then, you know, your computer will send up some, you know, packets to the server, and it'll hit something, and eventually you're going to get something back. How long does that take? That's a very critical metric to measure, because if something takes a long time, that could indicate some of these back-end problems that I mentioned earlier, things like PHP processing time, slow queries, or anything like that. There's lots of caching stuff that could happen that can solve that too. So, like, when I talk about the time to first byte metric, this is a screenshot from Chrome Developer Tools. Has anyone here used Chrome Developer Tools? That's good. So within Chrome Developer, if you're not familiar with it, you can go to any website in Chrome, and other browsers have developer tools too. You can right-click, you can go inspect, and there's a bunch of tabs across the top. There's an audits tab and a performance tab, and you can run audits and performance audits, and it'll give you these kind of flame charts and show you how your traffic's coming in. I don't have time to get into all that right now, but if you Google it, run it, you will see a graph similar like this. And you can see right up on the left-hand side, like when that data first gets here, that is your time to first byte. Time to first meaningful paint is when the browser actually paints stuff on the screen. You know, that's when the browser is actually, you know, taking this HTML, looking at your style sheets, looking at all these assets that are that what we call the critical path, the stuff that the website is dependent on in order to print anything, and it puts it on the website. And that's really important, because that's when you actually start seeing stuff on your website. You can see this within that view because there's like a little timeline, and you can see maybe to the left up here, you know, we have a paint operation, but the fonts aren't there. And to me, that website doesn't, you know, that's not meaningful to me until I see that text. So the first meaningful paint on this particular image right here is somewhere around, like, I don't know, 1,300 milliseconds. And time to interactive is when your website is actually like consistently interactive. Has anyone ever gone to a website on their phone and, you know, it loads up and you can see that button and you hit the button and then nothing happens? And so what do? You hit it harder, because like that's gonna help, right? You're gonna hit it harder, and then like eventually it comes up and you're like, ugh. And that right there is your JavaScript is still being processed by your website, and it's not ready. The website isn't ready because it's still processing all the JavaScript. And one thing that I'm going to talk about is how JavaScript runs in one single thread. So if it's doing a bunch of stuff, it's not going to do anything else unless you're doing something super fancy, but that's out of the scope of this. And if you put all that type of stuff together, you get what's called the speed index. And this is kind of like a calculated value. And it doesn't necessarily calculate how quickly it's visible at the end, but how quickly it approaches visibility. You know, you can have two different websites. one website that like, you know, shows stuff incrementally and you can start using it, or you can have a website that just like pops in at the end. The one that starts showing incrementally will have a higher speed index. And that gives you an idea. All of these are like kind of crucial metrics when you're measuring a website to understand. And so now we're going to kind of use that knowledge to like talk about like how browsers work, you know, and how browsers download stuff. I'm plowing through this pretty fast because we don't have a lot of time. So I apologize for all this. It's like kind of like this flood of information. So the first thing your website does is it downloads the HTML file, right? And as it's downloading this HTML file, it starts looking at it and it starts prioritizing stuff. It says, hey, there's a CSS file. I can't do anything without that CSS file. So it starts downloading the CSS file. It starts downloading anything that you might have in there marked as preload, you know, like sometimes you're doing fonts or something like that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. It starts looking at JavaScript, and it starts looking at JavaScript that's not like, you know, marked as deferred or anything that's in the head. And it pulls all that stuff down in images, right? And it prioritizes stuff as it's coming down. It prioritizes the initial document and CSS is highest. You have your web fonts coming in, and it starts putting everything all together and it starts pulling it down. And as it's pulling it in, let's see, well, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this slide here. All right, so you can see the priority column in here. This is, once again, Chrome Developer Tools, and there's a priority column that you can add to the Network tab, and it shows the different priorities right there. So as it's pulling it in, it starts to execute the JavaScript, right? And it's pulling in all this JavaScript, and it has to modify what's called the DOM, because it takes all that HTML and it creates like kind of representation of the HTML into memory, and that's what you see output on your website, and then it does basically the same thing with style sheet. So it takes and it creates the DOM out of the HTML and the CSS object model out of the CSS, and it merges those into what's called a render tree. And a render tree is interesting because stuff that you might like. Is anybody familiar with CSS? You can display none stuff, or you can remove stuff from the DOM. That when you display none stuff, it takes it out of the render tree. So your browser has to know what it's actually going to render on the web page. And I know all this is like kind of abstract, but we're going to talk about optimizing some of this, and this is going to help render that stuff on the website a little bit quicker. So after it has all that done, it does this layout operation, and this is when it kind of calculates. It goes boop, 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 and it doesn't really make those sounds, but you can think of it does, and it starts putting it on the page, but it doesn't actually draw it yet. It just calculates, you know, hey, this text is going to be this wide because it has this font, you know, this image has this, height and width, and it's pushing everything down. And this is what's called the layout operation. This is a kind of an expensive operation. Your computer has to think about it a lot because there's a lot that goes into it. And after that, it starts doing what's called a painting, and that's when it starts drawing stuff. You know, it starts like calculating background colors, and you know, it takes those images and puts them on there. It actually calculates the colors of your fonts that you're putting in there. And once again, this is another expensive operation. At the end, it does what's called compositing, and because it can create multiple layers, kind of similar to Photoshop layers, and so you can move them around. And compositing is very cheap. And at that point, you get the stuff on your website. And so the reason I'm telling you all this is because your browser is doing a lot of stuff. It's a complicated task, but like it goes by like so quick. You know, if you have a good web page, you know, I want that to load in under a second, and it can. So let's talk about like how to measure all this stuff. And I also want to call out like all my cool jet engine like stuff, you know, because I put like all the what do you call it? All the web terminology pointing to things, and I just think that's neat. Anyway, let's talk about Honest Tab. I'm going to actually do some live demos here because that's kind of what we do. And so if I go into Chrome, when you do live demos, or sorry, when I do measurements in Chrome, I always open up what's called a guest window. And the guest windows are really important because they don't load extensions. You know, like if I open up incognito, I can still have maybe extensions. Guest windows do not have extensions. And I always like to do news sites because they tend to be like kind of, I don't know, have a lot of ads and things like that. So what we're going to do right here is I'm going to open up, you see I right click, I go to inspect, and now I'm going to go to the audits tab. And there's a couple interesting things that you're going to see here. Is you're going to see there's tons of different audits that you can do, including best practice, accessibility, SEO, PWA, and I'm just going to do performance because that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to hit this generate report. And as this is happening right here, there's a couple things that I want you to understand. The first thing is that this will actually measure at a 3G connection. And that's really, really important because not everybody is always on, you know, cable or 4G connections or anything like that. Even in our like general lives, even I have like a fast phone, I typically, like I'll go to conferences and might have bad Wi-Fi, which honestly the Wi-Fi here has been fantastic. So let's wait for this to load as I drink some water. I totally will. Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of information. And we don't have a lot of time. Let's see what I got here as far as time right here. All right, so yeah, so you got a pretty bad score right here. But what's really interesting right here is we can hit this view trace button down here. And it actually loads up, bless you, it loads up the profile right there. So once again, I hit this view trace and it loads it up. And it's kind of cool because it shows a number of different things that you can see right here. It will show these flame charts, and all this yellow right here is JavaScript, and the purple is layout, and the green is maybe compositing, yeah. And what's kind of neat is you can highlight part of it, and you can kind of see what's going on in here. You can see things like first FCP is first contentful paint, first meaningful paint, DOM content loaded, largest contentful paint, and things like that. So you can kind of look at that a little closer. You can see that like our time to first byte is really, really quick because we're probably loading off CDN, and so it gets you that data first. But then we're seeing like a whole bunch of JavaScript come in. I'm not going to kind of talk about this too much because we don't have a heck of a lot of time. But I encourage you to go in there and just play with it because it's like a lot of fun. So I want to talk about like optimization now. Like now I'm transitioning into the area where like, you know, you should be thinking about doing this. So I want you to think about serve your pages faster and serve your critical resources first and using less bandwidth and, you know, limit your network requests. And let's maybe talk about some of those individually. So I want to talk about like there's a protocol, the protocol that serves web pages to you is called HTTP. It calls for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, right? And there's a couple. The old protocol is version 1.1, and the new one's HTTP 2, so version 2, right? So HTTP 2 is kind of abbreviated as H2, which to me is like really confusing because there's also an H2 header that has nothing to do with it. But so it just H2, right? So H2 is supported by all browsers, including Internet Explorer 11, and you should be using it. And now this is something that you need to turn on the server side. So your host needs to support this. This is not anything like a plugin or anything like that. This is turned on like on the Apache or Nginx level. But you can check it by adding that protocol tab onto DevTools and seeing that and then reloading and seeing what the protocol says. What that enables you to do, so the old version of HTTP, version 1.1, only downloads like 6 items at a time, you know, and for each of those it has to reach up and it has to, the protocol says has to do like what's called a 3-way handshake and say, hey, how are you doing? I'm fine, you know, and it has to do that for every single asset. And that can take a lot of time, especially if you're on high latency connections like cell phones or mobile phones or things like that. H2 does what's called multiplexing, where you have just one connection and then it shoots down all these assets in one big connection, and it can reprioritize on the fly and do a whole bunch of really neat things. Something else when I talk about using less bandwidth right here. So this is something that was on my company's website a while ago, and I have seen so many websites that I've audited, and these one of the first things I do is I say well, how much bandwidth are you using? So I might go to, I'm not picking on any website in particular, but there might be my favorite WordCamp in the southeast United States might have some very large images loaded on there that don't need to be that large, So if you go to that WordCamp's website, go to DevTools, sort by this, you're going to see these 3 megabyte PNGs that could easily be 100 kilobyte JPEGs or something like this, and the website's about 10 megabytes for the home page. That to me is very large, especially if you are on mobile. You might be on a bad Wi-Fi connection. The cellular network for me, it doesn't reach in here. I had to hop on Wi-Fi. It's very easy to check this, and there are plugins, there are WordPress plugins I'm going to talk about that can solve this for you automatically, and that is the best thing because people forget this. Or you have content creators. Content creators want to upload the highest resolution image. That is normal because they want it to look really good, but you don't necessarily think about bandwidth. So content delivery networks are very important. So what a content delivery network is it basically you pay a service, or your host integrates it and they pay a service, and they will actually pay for computers in local data centers around the world. And you configure your website so that when people type in www.whatever.com, it knows to go to the closest website. And that shaves off a lot of time because it doesn't have to maybe go to San Francisco or Chicago or something like that. The speed of light can only go so fast. And even though the speed of light is ridiculously fast, it adds on to it can easily add on a half a second. And that half a second on a fast connection stretches to things like 3 to 4 seconds on a slower connection. So CDNs also do a lot of optimizations. They will also compress your data. They will maybe compress your images and serve CDNs typically use H2 to serve that. And you can sign up for things like Cloudflare for on lower tiers for free, and it's limited. Or a lot of popular WordPress hosts integrate CDNs too. Pantheon does. I know WP Engine has options to do that. I would venture to guess that all of the premium hosts have CDN options, and it might cost a little bit of money, but it also serving your website quicker saves you money. Resource hints. I am going all over the place. Resource hints are almost like meta tags. You put them in the top of your website, and it tells the browser to download things before it needs to know it. An example of this is web fonts. So in order to download, normally you define your web fonts in your CSS, right? So in a normal situation, your browser has to download the HTML, it has to download the CSS file, has to parse the CSS file, see there's some web fonts in there, reconcile that with any type of selectors that might need the web fonts, and then only then it will start downloading these web fonts. That is why you will frequently see web pages, and when it loads, you'll see the frame of the website first, and then the text comes in. And that's because the browser doesn't know to download the web fonts. You can do that with resource hints right here. I have this slide at the end where you can take a picture of all the things I want you to take away. So in this particular case, I'm using a preload to load a JavaScript file. I'm using pre-connect. Pre-connect is really neat because if you have multiple domains, you're loading maybe your images off of something, you can pre-connect to those. And when I say pre-connect, that's important because every time you connect to a new domain, your browser has to figure out its IP address. It has to do the TLS connection, which is the security SSL connection. And it has to do all that, and that can take a third of a second. That adds up. And when I say a third of a second on a fast connection, that might take 5 seconds on a slower connection. You can kind of see this in action right here, without and then with and then a big thumbs up. Once again, I'm kind of going through this pretty quickly in the name of time. All together, you can kind of see like right here. So we're loading fonts at the top. And something that's important, like you're not going to remember to like all the syntax right here because it's a lot of stuff. But what I want you to remember to do is like, hey, I want to look up resource hints. I want to know how to preload my fonts. When you're preloading fonts, there's this cross-origin attribute on the very end. The cross-origin attribute is important because fonts can download twice, and you don't want that. So you can start using this. And if there's no downside. I don't think Firefox supports it yet, but that's okay because it just ignores it. I want to talk about what's called the purple pattern. I am jumping around very quickly. I apologize. So the purple pattern is something that's kind of being defined by Google. You hear like frameworks like Gatsby use this a lot. And what they do is they push down these critical resources, right? And then they render the initial route. Rendering the initial route just says like, here's your HTML, and then pre-cache the remaining routes, and then lazy load everything else. And I want to talk a little bit about this because you can do a lot of this in WordPress through some plugins. So you can prefetch links that are in the viewport using a technology called Quick Link. And there's a couple plugins that can do this right here. So Quick Link is a JavaScript library that was created by Google, and what it does is it just looks for all the hyperlinks on that's on your viewport. And if it's in your viewport and it's going to the same domain, it'll pull it down. And this is pretty configurable. And it'll pull it down, and then your browser will cache it. So when someone clicks on one of those hyperlinks, it just loads very, very quickly. And obviously, that's a really good user experience. You need to be very, very careful with this, though, because for every single page load that they go to, it's going to download 10 page loads as it's pulling down all of the additional pages. So you need to have robust caching. You need to have, like, if you have a CDN in there for that caching layer, it can handle that. But if you are not running any type of caching or anything like that, it will totally overload your server. So FYI. So there's a couple plugins that do this, and there's probably some more that I don't have listed up here. But Flying Pages and Quick Link are two, and there's a comparison between them that I list right here. So you can kind of see this in action. This is a website right here that is downloading. You can kind of see it's pulling down the extra hyperlinks or the extra pages, and it's doing that after everything's downloaded, And you can kind of see that in action right here as it's pulling down on my company's website within Chrome Developer Tools. So I want to talk about image optimizations. I mentioned earlier about our most favorite WordCamp loading these large 3 megabyte PNGs on the website when they don't need to be. The only reason to use a PNG is if you need transparency. With a PNG, you can have a transparent background. It's good for logos, but honestly, you could be using SVGs for things like that too. There's a modern format called WebP that's supported in Chrome, and I believe it's supported in Firefox now. And it's supported in the newest version of Edge, which is based on Chromium. So WebP has like alpha transparency support, but it's a very small file size, right? So responsive images is pretty cool because it loads different image sizes based on how wide your screen is. So you don't want a very large image to be downloaded for my mobile phone because it takes up a lot more bandwidth. WordPress core supports responsive images out of the box, but you have to configure it and develop for it. There's a plugin. There's a number of these plugins. The one that I found right here is Short Pixel Image Optimizer. I want to talk a little bit about the critical path. Critical path is everything that your browser needs to download in order to render that initial that first main content above the fold. Now, when I say critical path, like, why is this important? Well, because you don't want to stick stuff in there that doesn't need to be there. Like, you want to, like, your browser's going to download all your CSS and all the JavaScript in the head, and if you don't need that, you can save time by taking that out. So another thing that's very important is animations. Like, animations can be very valuable. Animations can, like, extend the user experience by telling you where things come from and where things are going. But at the same time, they can cause repaints. And there's different ways to animate if you're using CSS or if you're using JavaScript to do animation. If you're animating things like the background position, which a lot of people do with, like, parallax websites, it will cause a lot of jankiness. Have you ever seen, like, a parallax website, and as you scroll, it goes like that, and then your computer's fan starts coming on, and like, you're like, what the hell is going on right here, right? Well, they're animating the wrong property. They're animating probably background position or top. If they animate things like the transform property, it will do that very smoothly. It has the same exact animation, but you're using a different property, so your browser interprets it a different way. And that's important because, I want my website to feel smooth, and I don't want it to be all slow and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about CSS. It used to be a very good idea to inline images. So I got 2 minutes left, right? So don't base 64 your images. Optimize your JavaScript. I have this really funny picture right here that says, this is the JavaScript main thread execution. So, like, my computer might have, like, I don't know, 8 cores or something. Only one of those is doing the JavaScript. So just keep that in mind, And processing times. I have a fancy iPhone 11. It is a really cool phone, but the websites render a lot quicker on this phone than they do on my average phone. So keep that in mind when you test websites. Test them on slower devices. I have an older Android phone sitting next to me, and I do test websites on that. That's very, very important. Don't load JavaScript, and don't, like, third-party scripts are, geez, I can talk all about this. There is a plugin called WP Asset Cleanup that will that purports to take all your items, the stuff that you don't need, and clean it up so it's loading less. I love that idea. If it works well, that's awesome. I'm not going to do a demo, but here are the takeaways right here. And so if you want to take a picture, this is the slide to take a picture of. So the takeaways are, like, use a CDN and identify these performance issues right here. There's tons of articles about it, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. It's fun, like, making these optimizations and seeing your page load time go down, and it's just really cool. Resource hints are really easy to use, and there's no downside to doing that. And play around with these plugins. But there is also there's a saying called tools, not rules. And what that means is measure everything. Like if you're going to install these WP asset cleanups and flying pages, measure it. Double check it's doing what you think it's going to do. Once again, mytalk.rocks. You can give me, like, a whole bunch of emojis if you'd like. So another thing, I took this from the picture coming in. I want to do Miami things tonight. Like, if anybody wants to go do Miami things, talk to me. And, like, I want to go, like, I don't know, to this area that I took a picture of. I live in Florida, but I'm in North Florida, so I never come down here. So I don't even know what that means. Thank you. And I don't know if I have any time to talk. I'm sure I don't. Oh, I do? All right, questions. Go ahead, right in front.
When it comes to image loads, is it better to use a picture tag to choose what size of image I want to load, or using the sources? Because this is like a big discussion on the internet about what is better.
Yeah, so it depends. Everything on the web is like, it depends. The cool thing about the picture tag is you can load different aspects of styles, so you can do like at mobile, I want to load like a portrait-oriented photo, and at desktop a wider one. Picture makes, I tend to use picture. Honestly, like I'm not too familiar with GT metrics. So my favorite tools are like the dev tools audits, which is based off of, it's called like Lighthouse tests. But my favorite tool that I didn't demo right here is called webpagetest.org. And webpagetest.org, I actually like have it open because I was hoping to demo it. WebPageTest is a open source project. It looks like it was designed in probably like, you know, the early 2010s, because it probably was, but it's kept up to date, and you can identify and like blocking scripts through this really, really easy. If you go to webpagetest.org, you can test your website and then just Google like how to read a web page test waterfall chart, and there's some really good tutorials. Well, you need to have like your expires header set properly on those. So like your CDN should 100% be caching your web fonts because they're static assets. Well, host your fonts locally then. Like I'm also not a fan of using things like Google Fonts. There's a tool called Google Fonts Extractor or something like that. Google Fonts Extractor. Yeah, Google Fonts Helper. And you can actually like pull out the Google Fonts and like everything that you need using this and to host it locally. Google Fonts are like very, you know, they're open source. Go ahead.
When it comes to Google, when it comes to web fonts loading, since they implemented this font display swap,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be affecting pages anymore once you add that to the
Yeah.
CSS.
Yeah, you're right. So what font display swap does is it basically loads up your like a system font until the web font downloads, and that's a very good thing to do. But you still got that flash of unstyled text, you know. So it is what it is. Let's do one more question as I'm cleaning up right up here, just to give people any more questions. Oh yeah, all right. The guy who's like going like that. Okay.
First do that and then have the second optimization to a plugin running. The second thing is, I'm surprised you didn't mention anything of New Relic. Are you using that? Have you used it?
Yeah, so the New Relic is awesome. New Relic is cool. There's a lot of what's called real user monitoring tools, RUM tools. And New Relic has integrations with that. There's another one called Speed Curve that's really good. I would love to mention all this, but I have no time.
Time is out.
I know, right? Thank you.
I got some good photos of you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this is mine. This is what's looking for.
All right, you guys can hear me good? Can't see my, there they go. All right, you guys ready to WordPress it up? I just found out, you know, when I walked in this room that my talk is a lightning talk, so I got about 20 slides to go through in 20 minutes, so we got to get through it fast, right? So we're going to be talking about clever ways to automate content creation with WordPress. So this is me, Brian Messenlaner. I don't understand why so many people get my last name wrong, but I was in the Marines. I'm a Jersey guy. Any Marines in here? No. Any military guys, women? Hey, Navy. Thank you for your service. Any Jerseyans? Yeah, Jersey. We don't pump our gas. We pump our fists, right? So I've been WordPressing it up for a while, since 2006, 2007. I got a copy of my slides on apppresser.com/. WCMIA 2020. If you want to go check it out, do that. So I wrote this book. It just came out, Building Web Apps with WordPress by O'Reilly Media. So if you want a free copy, you got to take a good picture of me, something clever, good caption, something funny, and I'll give away a copy of the book to that person. Make sure you take a picture of my good side, which happens to be both sides. So, so the first way to automate your content is to just pay somebody else to do it for you, right? So there's this service called Crowd Content. You could pay them money, and they have different levels of like people that are writing for you. So you can get the college kid at FIU in his dorm room eating ramen noodles that's writing for you. You can get the person that's working maybe at Time Magazine that's doing it on the side, or you can get a professor at FIU maybe writing content for you. So it all depends on what level. It integrates with WordPress. So you could set up your schedules to basically, they'll add content, write your content for you. It'll automatically use the WordPress API and dump that into draft mode for you. So if you don't have money to pay somebody else to build content, the best thing, other than you doing it yourself, is to get free content, right? So if you have people and you're trying to train them how to use the Gutenberg block editor in the back end of WordPress and log in and you're doing the password dance with them, I forgot my password. Did you click on the forgot password link? So instead of spending all your time, right, because this whole talk is about saving time and cost around helping to automate your content generation. So if you're doing that, right, and you get other people that might not necessarily understand WordPress, know what WordPress is, just give them a web form that they could just go put the content that you want into this web form, make it really simple for them to do. So there's all these great form building plugins out there. I'm sure you guys have seen all these before, right? Gravity Forms, Formidable Forms, W Forms, Ninja Forms. There's a bunch of other ones. Use them. Send them out to people that you want to contribute content, get that content in draft mode, then you could edit it from there. If you are using the new Gutenberg block editor, kudos to you. Some of you may be using the same blocks over and over again and may not know there's a core feature of the block editor called Add Reusable Blocks, and you can kind of just like, it's like your favorite blocks, and you add them to your favorite list. Boom, you can reuse them on any pages you want. So how am I doing? Good? I'm burned through these. So, all right, so we also got this great plugin. This is one of my favorites. It's called Admin Columns. So if your SEO should be very important to all of you, right? So, but instead of going down and drilling into every single page or post, and I usually hold down Control and hit the mouse and open up multiple tabs and then go through once at a time. But once I found this plugin, Admin Columns, you could set any post metadata for any post type in WordPress to show up on the post listing page, and then also to edit that information. So instead of drilling into each page one at a time, updating information, you could do it all from one place, right? Save a bunch of time. Social Web Suite. This is a really cool service and WordPress plugin. So basically, you can connect to multiple WordPress sites via the API. It connects to all your default social media accounts: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. They're trying to do Instagram right now, but you know how that works. So basically, you could set up schedules. You could automate pulling in feeds, RSS feeds, to basically repost that content, whatever it is. You have a new post on your blog. You got it coming in. You could automatically post that out and syndicate that to other WordPress sites, to all your social media accounts, to 5 different Facebook pages. You can set it up however you want. That's Social Web Suite. So you could also hire a developer if you want to integrate with other things, other systems, other platforms that you may be using to help run your business. You could integrate and try to automate passing data and content back and forth between these systems using the WordPress REST API. For those of you that may have read that and are like, don't understand what the heck that means, basically the translation is you can, connect to these other systems. A lot of people throw around the term headless WordPress, right? Have you guys heard of that? So basically it's using WordPress not for a website. You can use it for a website still, but it's using it to power other things, using the back-end content management capabilities to power, say, a mobile app, or integrate and push your products from WordPress to Magento, or whatever you want, really. DIY your API, right? So there's also these services, if this, then that, and you can set up like these custom modules. So if you do a WordPress post, it's going to drop it into a Google Sheet for you, or it's going to send it to Shopify, or post it on Twitter, or whatever you want. And you can create all these custom modules. Both of these systems are kind of very similar. IFT and Zapier, they're both have premium models that you can connect pretty much anything to anything that has an API. Really cool service. Check it out. This is great for generating custom workflow, help you save a lot of time and money. WordLift. So use AI to generate search optimized content and tags. So this, everyone kind of thinks like, if you came here thinking like, oh, he's going to tell us about some artificial intelligence that you put in some keywords and it pops out some awesome content that makes sense, we're not quite there yet. The robots, they're still not where they need to be. But there are all these services like WordLift that'll analyze your content and suggest tags and keywords to use for SEO. There's also what's called content spinners, right? So it's assisted UI or AI to where they'll take some content that you have and they'll spin it up for you. And what I mean by spin it up is they'll replace some of the words. It's basically going to like a thesaurus and figuring out what the same types of meanings of words are, swapping them out, changing the sentences around. And then it'll validate that it is unique content on the internet, right? So you could spin up content and pump out brand new content from maybe old content that you had, so you don't have to particularly rewrite a whole new article. You could recycle something. And then there's this Article Forge. So there's a couple AI, content builder services out there that are saying, hey, we're the one, but they're not really. I would say the closest one that I've found is Article Forge. And if you go to apppresser.com/WCMIA 2020, there's an example of a post about 750 words that was generated from Article Forge with the keywords WordCamp Miami, WordCamp, and WCMIA 2020. And it's a very interesting article, but as you read it, you could tell like, hey, what's this guy talking about? So it doesn't completely make sense. Robot, you're drunk, go home. So RSS syndication, everybody knows about RSS. It's been around for forever. There's a couple different WordPress plugins. There's a good one called Feed WordPress that's been around for a while. There's a whole bunch of them though. But that'll suck in RSS feeds from other sites. So not saying you should go like just take content from anybody's site, right? That's not a good idea. But if you were to take content from somebody's site that you had the permission to take their content, or you had a network of sites, partners, affiliates, or whatever that you have access to that content, you could take those RSS feeds, send them into the AI spinner, and pump out brand new content that's completely unique, and there's nobody's going to have any problem with you doing that. This is a cool one. It's not a WordPress plugin, but it's a standalone application that can run on your desktop or your mobile app. It's called Text Expander. So if I were to type in WCMIA, the hashtag, it automatically converts it to I love WordCamp Miami. It's the best WordCamp in the universe, right? So, and you could put pictures in there. You could use code. So this is great if you had canned like email responses, or you're writing the same pieces of content over and over again. And like rule of thumb, if you're sitting there and you're doing the same thing more than once, then create a snippet for it, right? Because chances are you're probably going to use it a third time. If you go to apppresser.com/textexpander, they're giving away 50% discount on the year Life Hacker account. So this is pretty cool. Definitely a time saver. Try it out. For those of you that are maintaining and building the same types of websites over and over again, say you have a particular type of client, like a realtor client, and you're building them all these, pumping out all these realtor websites. Well, you know that the time that you spend supporting and maintaining these separate databases, separate WordPress installs, can be very time consuming. You got to go and update all the plugins on every single site. So WordPress multi-site is a WordPress core feature that you could turn on in the config file, and basically it uses one database and one set of source files to build and manage as many WordPress sites as you want. So this is a great time saver if you're pumping out websites that are very similar to each other. Look at WordPress multi-site. There's also a lot of WordPress multi-site plugins. This is one of my favorite, NS Cloner. So you probably have been in, or some of you probably have been in similar situations where you activate a new website, you install a new theme, and then it's just completely blank. And it just looks nothing like what they promoted on their website, that theme looking like, because you have no content in there. So on WordPress multi-site, you could set up a dummy site with some default content, your default configuration on the back end for the plugins that you're using and stuff like that. And then you could just use that as basically a site to clone or to copy. Using this plugin, you could virtually select from a drop-down box any site on your multi-site network that you want to clone, and just put in a new title, hit a button, and boom, it's making a copy of that. All the settings are there. All your pre-built content is already there to start with. So huge time saver. This happens to be one of my personal favorites, AppPresser, right? So basically, AppPresser is a framework and a series of WordPress plugins that allow you to build iOS and Android apps without actually having to know how to build iOS and Android apps. You use your WordPress skills to build these mobile apps. And the whole point of this is it gives, having an app in the Apple Store and Google Play gives people more doorways to your content, right? You're duplicating your content to these different platforms. And then also, of course, one of the biggest benefits to having a native mobile app in the app stores is utilizing push notifications, right? It's the best way to get out in front of your audience, whoever that may be. So, build mobile apps with AppPresser. Google Vision API, if you guys haven't messed with this is super cool. And you can go, do a Google search. You could, upload any picture and they'll analyze it for you. But basically, you upload a picture. Google's API is, or their AI is, running through the image and trying to figure out what that image is. And you can see how accurate this is, right? Eyewear, 99%, glasses, sunglasses, fashion accessory, facial hair. So all these could be, if you're a developer or you hire a developer, or there might be some plugins out there to do stuff similar, but you could virtually upload a picture and then automatically build your tags right from the image. You don't have to even go look at the picture. It's generating images. You could take those keywords that are generated, send that into Article Forge, have it build a whole article for you. So you could almost have an article, a WordPress post, ready to be published. You still have to go through, right? Like I said, we're not there yet with the robots that are going to write real, relevant content that makes sense. But if it could get you 30% of the way there, 40% of the way there, and you have to pump out a lot of WordPress posts, that's going to help you save a lot of time. As you could tell, their algorithms aren't quite what they need to be yet. They still got the engineers at Google still have a lot of work to do. They have cool only at 77%, and everybody knows I'm at least 100% cool. So they got their work cut out for them still. Oh yeah, I did it, under time. Questions? Anybody got any questions, WordPress questions? I got 5 minutes still, so bring it on me. No questions. So one of the main points, if you don't take away anything that I talked about here right now, one of the most important things about why we're saving time and money, right, is to invest that back into our business, invest that time doing other things. But more importantly, if any of you are ever struggling with the balance between work and life, right? The scale, which you choose. Always choose life, especially if you got little kids, right? Those little kids that want to spend time with you. When they're teenagers, guess what? Like I got a 19-year-old daughter, she don't want to spend time with me. The only time I hear from her is when she needs money. So when you got those little kids and they want to hang out with you, if you could optimize your time to save you time, spend that time with your kids. And oh, I got a real question. Yeah. So going through, after, and you guys should go try, all try out Article Forge and put in some keywords and test it out, because it can be really funny, some of the content that it's building. There's an example of it, like I said, on apppresser.com/WCMIA2020. But as you're going through and reading it, you're like, that makes no sense. That's not what WordCamp is or WordPress does. It would make sense if it said this. But that gives you the idea, like, oh, I just changed it to say that, and then it's correct. So as you're going through, like some stuff you're going to cut out and be like, that makes no sense at all. Some stuff makes sense and is accurate, and then some stuff it's going to give you ideas to modify it a little bit and make it better. Yeah. Yep. All right, I got 2 minutes. I got one more question. Come on. Somebody's sitting there right now thinking of a question, doesn't want to say it. Who is it?
Someone in the back.
Okay. Oh, it's on Amazon, Target, Walmart, O'Reilly. So you could buy it anywhere. I'm giving this one away for free though. Anyone that wants to take the best picture of me. So I'll go back to where I'll go back to the beginning, right here. Yeah. So if anybody wants to get their camera out, yeah. WordPress, yo. WordPress. All right, yeah. All right, thanks, everybody.
That was awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Oh, thank you.
That was really awesome. Next, we're going to be hearing from Chris Edwards. Who's going to be
I'll take the mic.
Oh, yeah, I want that.
UTM.
Is this it? No, that's just
Oh,
so
yeah.
fun.
Here we go. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. There you go.
There it is. All right. Go back. Good. Come on. And one more. All right, man.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks. Ready to start now? Start now or start?
Oh, 20 minutes.
All right, we're going to get started. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. So today we're going to talk about tracking your website with UTM codes. This is used for any kind of analytics that you're using. Mostly Google Analytics is what we'll be talking about today with this, but they do work with everything else, and we're going to kind of talk about what they are and so forth. But before we get started, how many in here already use Google Analytics on their website? Awesome. How many here do not use any kind of analytics on their website? All right. So first off, big thing, I'm a big advocate for tracking everything and knowing what's going on your site. Because knowing what's happening on your site is going to help you understand where to spend your marketing dollars and where to focus your efforts and your time as you move forward. And so we're going to talk a little more about that. So real quick, I'm Chris Edwards. I run an agency out of Orlando called Data Driven Labs. I've been a website developer for about 20 years. I've been working on WordPress for about 8 years. And I've been using Google Analytics for over 15 years. I got involved with Google Analytics back before Google bought it. It was known as HERCHEL Analytics back then. And that's when I kind of got involved with it. I've been a digital marketer and doing SEO and PPC and those different types of things for about 13 years as well. So all that to say, I've been a data nerd my entire life. I've always been about tracking everything and really diving in to Google Analytics and really understanding what's going on my website and my different properties. So let's talk about what a UTM is. So UTMs, they're going to basically help us understand where our traffic is coming from. And I know many will say, well, that's easy. I already see that in Google Analytics. I can tell you if my traffic came from Facebook or Twitter. But what UTMs allows us to do is to really dive down more in depth and know exactly where that traffic came from, what emails brought that traffic in, what link inside of that email brought the traffic in, what exact post that you posted on Facebook or Twitter, which one of those are what brought that traffic in and what converted. So UTMs are going to tell us exactly where our marketing efforts are working and where they're not. So if you're trying different things on Facebook or you're posting in different places, maybe you want to see where you're spending a lot of time and where you're not spending, and what is actually converting. We find a lot of people will be spending a lot of time posting over into this one area on Facebook, and then once we implement UTMs, we find out that it's this small little niche group that they're posting in over here that's driving most of their traffic and their sales to their website, but they're putting all their effort over here. Just by switching some of that time and resources over to the other one is what's going to help them succeed. So kind of want to talk real quick what a UTM is. It's an urchin tracking module. You'll never need to know that again. You're always going to hear it as UTMs, and that's what you're always going to notice them as. It's a group of tags that basically are appended to the end of your URL. You guys have seen this everywhere you've gone on the web. It's this long, ugly thing that's behind the URL when you plug it in, and those are all the different campaign attributes and so forth. That's all the stuff that's in that query string that is a UTM. You are able to track them, and almost every single analytics software out there works with them. So if you're using any kind of other analytics software such as Adobe Analytics, or you're using Mixpanel or any of those types of services, they all also work with UTMs. They're not unique and specific to just Google Analytics. So kind of want to dive and break this down, what this URL is, and this is where you're going to see the magic of how UTMs work. So we see in here we have the URL, and you have inside of this long string, we have multiple items. We have our website URL, our campaign source, our campaign medium, and our campaign name. So when something comes, when someone comes from one of these properties, it automatically is going to try, Google Analytics is automatically going to try and determine what that source is or that referral type is. And this allows us to override that and define what it's going to save for that entire session of that user into Google Analytics. And I'll show you where we find these in a little bit inside of Google Analytics. So we're going to break this down. We're going to start out with the website URL. That's obviously the first piece here. That doesn't just have to be a domain. That can be /blog, /store, whatever. You can have that as your whole URL. And then what we do is we jump into that first part of the string, which is going to be our campaign source. So that's UTM_source equals Google. I'm going to show you, you don't have to remember how to write all this out. I'm going to show you at the end of this how you can do that really easily using tools that are free and available online. So breaking this down a little further, we see our medium in here, campaign medium, and that's going to be cost per click.
Our campaign name is product. And then we also have UTM content and UTM term, which we'll talk about in a minute what those actually are. So campaign source. Campaign source, this is going to be what refers the traffic to your page. So this could be the website, platform, or tool that you posted this on. So Google, Facebook, Twitter, MailChimp, Outbrain, Reddit, wherever else you may have posted this content, that's what your source is going to be. So MailChimp, if you're using like email newsletter, you can have MailChimp in there. But this is going to be the actual source of where everything came from. Then we have next is that medium. So this is the marketing medium that you use to refer that traffic. Unlike the source, this is going to this is more what type of traffic it is. So we're talking like, is it a PPC ad? Is it a banner ad, email, or just a post or a tweet? You're going to go ahead and mark what kind of medium it is, because what allows us down the road to do is to sort by those different mediums. And then your campaign name. So this is whatever is unique to your campaign. This is what you're calling your, how you're going to identify this later on. And the campaign name could be the same across different mediums. So that's kind of one cool thing is if you're running the spring sale, you could actually have spring sale as your campaign name, and you can have different mediums. You can have the social mediums, you can have the, so Twitter, Facebook, those different posts. You can have those, you can have the email, you can have all these different mediums that are available so that you can then track how well that campaign name did across those different platforms. And then we have content. Content usually, so UTMs, if you're using Google Ads, you don't have to use UTM codes because Google Ads auto-tracks into your Google Analytics unless you're using a different software. But if you're using anything like Bing Ads or any of these other ones, you can use the UTM content to identify what content was, like what campaign or whatnot, like what ad group it was. But the other thing you can also use it for is testing your content. So if you want an A/B test, so you're sending out an email to, you're putting two different posts out there and you're going to see which one works better, you can have content A and content B, and this helps where you can identify down to the individual Facebook tweet or Facebook post that you're putting out there so you can see how well each one of those posts performed. So I'll use this a lot of times and I'll put in some kind of unique identifier so I know that I'll have a spreadsheet and I'll have like 8 different Facebook posts that I want to send. And what I'll do is I'll put that inside this section so I can see which one of those posts drove the most traffic to my site and how much of that traffic converted into customers or made purchases on my site. So this allows me to go back and see what wording worked and what wording didn't work. And then your UTM, the term, this is normally a keyword. You use this more for like if you're using Bing or one of those other platforms if you want to put your keyword term in there. And you can also find other ways to do this. I've used this also to say where in the email I put the link. So when I've sent out emails before, I've actually stated like, I've tried different call to actions on there. So one may say click here versus another one says click here to find out more. And I put those in there so that I can see how well those different ones are performing as well inside the analytics. So we talked about how to, what to put all inside, or what to put inside that link. Where do you find this inside of Google Analytics? What you're going to want to do is you're going to go under Acquisition and then All Campaigns. And inside this section, you're going to see, we're able to see over here listed out all the different campaigns. We can sort by campaign source, medium, and also by the campaign name inside of Google Analytics. And what it allows us to do is we can then see, these are campaign names from an actual campaign we ran for a client. And you can see inside here, we can actually see how well each one of these campaigns did in both sessions, all the way over to how much revenue they generated. So we can see down here, what's in number 6 generated only about $30,000 in revenue, versus this top one generated $119,000 in revenue. So what we do is when we look at that kind of information, we know that this is working and this is not working. And it allows us to really break down and see those different places that we posted these posts and these different emails that we sent. We're able to find out what worked and what didn't work when we did this. And you can break these campaigns down. Doesn't just have to be a campaign name. You can break it down by medium, by source as well, so we can actually understand where we're driving the most dollars. We have a lot of people who find that they're putting a lot of time into Twitter and
Facebook and Pinterest, and depending on what kind of industry they're in, we find that by comparing these different things, we can see that the one item that they may be only spending 5% of their time on is the item driving most of their traffic, and they're wasting all their other time over here. And just by shifting that time over to the other platform that's working, they're able to triple their revenues or even more, because now they're focusing on the item that was working and putting more time into that. All right, so those are really complex. They can be annoying to try to write. There's a couple ways to create them. The easiest way is just using an online UTM builder. The easiest way to find this is literally go into Google, pop in UTM builder into a search, and you're going to find several of them, including one made by Google themselves, that is going to build these links out for you. We also have one available if you go to datadrivenlabs.io/UTM. It's a open, free one that works. I'll actually show you kind of how it works here so you can kind of get an idea. Let's see, is it going? Maybe I have to click it. Yeah, there it goes. And so simply, with all these UTM builders, they all work the same. You plug in the URL that you want to track. And so this one, for example, is example.com. And then you put in your source. And so on this one, put in Facebook as our source. I should make this video play faster. And then put in our medium with CPC, campaign name, and you'll see down here at the bottom, as you're writing this out, it's actually writing out all of this for you into a URL. This is the same way the Google one works. As a matter of fact, we kind of copied a little bit the way Google's functioned for easy use. Hit copy to clipboard, and now you have that saved. You can use that going further. There are also, if you're going to be doing a whole lot of these, and you have a team, a marketing team, or you have a few people, or even it's just yourselves, there are some really cool Google Sheets, if you use Google Sheets, or even Excel if you use Excel. There's a whole bunch of those out there that actually auto-generate the URL for you and keep track of them so you can save them as you go down. We've done this with a lot of our clients that have marketing teams, where we've created a sheet that has one of these, and if you just Google search, you'll find a bunch of these out there that you can use as templates. And you can then put in all your data going down as you build all these out, and it will build that link for you and save them as you go along. So that's the other way to do it. If you're just trying to generate one real quick, you can just use one of these online UTM builders as well. Let's see where we're at time. Okay. The biggest thing that we get a lot of people when they look at those UTMs, they go, ugh, those things are big, long, ugly, scary. You also don't want to just put those somewhere. If I put those on my slides here, you'd be sitting here trying to write that down forever to put all that in there and probably type something wrong along the way. So the easiest way is just to use a URL shortener. There's a lot of different ones you can add to your WordPress site if you wanted to build your own shortener out there. But if you want to use one service that already exists out there, there's Bitly, which is a free service you can use. You can build that whole UTM and that URL out, plug it into Bitly, and get a nice little short link that you can then share and use in other places to make it a little easier to use and a little easier to see that link. All right, and I know that was really fast, but we had a short time to get through this, so I wanted to save enough time to ask some questions. The slides are not up at that link. I'm having an issue getting online, so I haven't put them on there, but they will be, by tonight, they will be at that link. So, questions?
Not a question, but more of like a best practice.
Mm-hmm.
When you are naming your tags, to always maintain the same consistency with case, because Facebook with a capital F and Facebook with a lowercase f will show up in two different places.
Yes, so that's a great point. So when you're making these, Google Analytics is case sensitive. In my full talk, this is actually a cut off of the end of one of my Google Analytics talks. In my full talk, I actually go over a way to force everything coming in as all these different campaign attributes to automatically make them all lowercase with a filter, which is what I highly suggest you do in the first place. But yes, it is case sensitive. So if you don't have that filter set up and you put Facebook with a capital F and one with it lowercase and one with the B inside of there being capitalized, it's all going to track differently if you don't set up those filters. So make sure you stay consistent, and that's where that Excel sheet comes in handy, because you can make sure everyone's using the same terms over and over. And then also work on, if you can, go set up those filters. If you Google how to add those filters in, you'll find those. Or if you look on WordPress,
MARC.TV, one of my Google Analytics talks, I go over that as well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Once you create the UTMs, where on the site do you place them for pages, posts, and say e-commerce products?
Okay, so these are for outside marketing into your website. Internally, you don't want to use these because internally your site's going to track the visitor as they go along anyways for their Google Analytics session. So this is only to be used for an outside source. So if you want to promote that product on Facebook or you want to promote that product through an email newsletter, you would use a UTM to get them to the site. But linking internally inside your website, you want each one of those just to be regular links inside your website because Google Analytics will track that session as they progress through your site already.
You can use event tracking to track like which buttons are being most clicked and other events.
Yes.
How do you feel about stripping the UTMs from the URL using JavaScript after a user has landed so that they're not like copying that URL, sending it somewhere else and kind of messing up where your content is coming?
Yes, I have a version of these slides that has a link to, and I just realized that that's not in this one. Yes, there is a really cool, Wistia wrote it. There's a really cool piece of JavaScript that Wistia wrote that will actually, you can put on your site, and because once they come in, it registers it to the Google Analytics session cookie, so it does not need to keep going. And what he's talking about is stripping out all of those because every once in a while you'll get people who like your content and they'll grab that URL and reshare it somewhere else. Well, now they are sharing that whole entire UTM code, so when someone else comes, even though they came from an email and they took it and they posted it on Facebook, now all that traffic's going to count as the email and it's going to confuse people. So there is a piece of JavaScript code that you can drop in there. I should actually probably go and just create that into an easy plugin. Another idea for another time. Yeah, so it's a simple piece of JavaScript you can put in there, and what happens is as soon as they come to your site, it strips it out of there so it's no longer there, but it has already registered so that if they do copy and paste that somewhere else, it's not going to carry those UTMs over. Thanks for bringing it up. That's a great point. I saw a question over here, I thought. Maybe not? Okay. Oh, yes, Bobby.
Chris, actually, I have a question about like outside documents. Like I have a client who loves PDFs, which really difficult to track, right, with analytics because you can't put analytics on the code. So thinking about UTMs to track that any links that are clicked within the PDF that come back to the website. So how do you recommend to best track those kinds of outside documents that have no way of?
So that would be a great way to do it. So your source would be, you can have it as your source be a document, medium be PDF, and then your campaign could be the name of that document. And then that would be a great use case for using it because then every time they click that from that document, you're going to get the tracking to know they came from that document. So that would be a great use case to do it. Again, make sure you put it as the hyperlink in there and so it's nice and clean looking. And if you do have to put the full URL, use a URL shortener for that.
Cool. Thanks.
And I saw another question over here. Yes, sir.
Will you also apply this to video content, say on Vimeo or YouTube?
Yes. If you're going to do it on there, use the URL shortener as well, so that way you can then track. So not only do you know, because you'll know it came from YouTube because the source will be YouTube, but that'll be about it. But if you use the UTMs, you can actually put in the information to know exactly which video brought them over.
Will you put it in the description area?
Yes, that's where I would normally put it. And then you can also, inside the videos on YouTube, and they keep changing things, so I might be wrong on this, but you can sometimes put a link inside the video. But I'm not sure if they still do that. They got rid of that? Okay, so they took that out. So yeah, I'd put it in the description, but use a URL shortener so that it doesn't make this long, nasty looking link. Yes?
How does the process change if you purchase your own shortened link?
If you purchase your own shortened link, if you're doing it through Bitly, it works the same. You just use the shortened link. But if you use, I'm trying to think, the plugin name just skipped my head. There's a plugin that you can use, or there's a yours. It's YOURLS. If you use that one, or any of the other ones that are similar to that, it's the same way. As long as the whole UTM's in there, it'll work. You just use that URL shortener. And I actually do that with these are, actually these are just redirects, but they'll add the UTMs in if I need them to. Okay, any other questions? All right, I think lunch is starting up, so thank you. Thank you.
Do you white label as well at your agency?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yeah.